Chapter 201. After they sent Sillin and the others away, Hu Du and Ji Feihong both asked about Sillin, and the news they received shocked them beyond words. The fact that Vanguard was able to evade their detection and escape from so many puppets and experimental beasts proved that Vanguard truly lived up to its name. Even their B squadrons were impressive. After the matters of the Miracle Corporation's branch on this planet were settled, Hu Du and Ji Feihong sat in a private meeting room. I remember that Sillin was listed on the A rank in the secret report regarding the 6th Division, Hu Du said. The military of the League of Stars had a secret list. At that time, the League of Stars would list out some famous forces or people who were as famous as the 4 great hunter regiments. From high to low, they were S, A, B, and C. The A rank ranking Sillin was mostly made up of a few captains of the 4 great hunter regiments and people from the 4 main squads. Although the Vanguard Division 6 Captain Schotten was a captain, he was not listed on the A rank ranking. Instead, it was Sillin who had just taken over as a vice captain not long ago who was listed on the A rank ranking. This was something Knight did not know. He had not reached the level to know about the ranking yet. That is true. Ji Feihong nodded. Because of pride, when he found out that there was a person named Sillin in the 6th B Squadron, he suspected that the assassin Pride spoke of wasn't actually dead, and that it was just a hunter regiment's ploy after completing their mission. It was exactly because he had done a special investigation and checked some military documents that Ji Feihong found out that this person had already been listed in the A rank ranking. How much do you know about him? A little. But the main reason he was listed on the A rank ranking was Wei Fun. The Wei Fun Ji Feihong spoke of was actually a mouse who once worked undercover in Poison Fong. His real name was Wei Fun. Wei Fun? The guy who snuck into Sector V to carry out a spy mission and was promoted to Major after Poison Fong was eliminated? He actually has such a high evaluation of Sillin. Hu Landuo still had some impression of Wei Fun, because he knew that Wei Fun had been exchanged by the military from the Vanguard. Although Wei Fun was exchanged as a captive, no one dared to slander him. After all, Wei Fun had provided a lot of high-level intelligence over the years as a spy. Moreover, the biological samples he brought back from the army were highly valued by the higher-ups. Ji Feihong briefly explained what he knew and what he learned from Wei Fun. If what Wei Fun said is true, then this Sillin person is really dangerous. After all, he is still very young. Something like potential is too difficult to fathom. Helanda sighed. When he thought of Knight, Helanda suddenly said, based on what you said, Sillin isn't just a powerful individual. He also has a wide network of connections. Your Fiegler family's Knight, Andryer family's eccentric Kailong, the CI family's CI Jincheng, the 4-star academician's old man Mo, and the one who surprised me even more was the Yu family's little grandaunt. All of these people are connected to Sillin. Hu Landuo let out a low laugh. Interesting. He stopped studying Sillin and asked, are there still no video recordings on the other side? All the surveillance devices are collectively blinded, and the research base's AI system, has been hacked and destroyed. That Chedo is the only person who can escape our signal detection. It is very difficult to figure out his background. Hu Landuo crossed his arms and asked in puzzlement, Chedo? Sillin. What is their relationship? Before this, I don't remember this person being mentioned in the investigation report on Vanguard Division 6. Ever since the 6th Division came out of Sector Z, the military had investigated Vanguard Division 6 in detail. However, there was no such person as Chedo. Every B squadron absorbs new blood. This Chedo is probably one of them. Unfortunately, we don't have the chance to test their strength. Hu Landuo looked at the sky outside and said in a low voice, there will be a chance. Right now, Sillin was completely unaware that he was listed on the military's secret A-rank list. Right now, he was performing a final checkup on Chifeng and Shueqiu together with Tico and Lycrape. The results are pretty good. At this rate, they should be able to fully recover in 2 days. Sillin patted Shueqiu's fat butt and grabbed the white fatty's ear just as he was about to slip away. Control your appetite for the next 2 days after you fully recover. Don't overeat. After being listless for a few days, the white fatty had lost a lot of weight and regained his vigor. He would probably eat to his heart's content until he had indigestion. Hearing Silen's words, Shueqio's ears drooped and looked pitifully at Silen. There's no point in acting pitiful. Wheeze, keep an eye on him. If you see him overeating, give him a claw and make him lie down for a few more days. Got it? At the side, Hui Mao wagged his tail inattentively and ignored Shueqio's pleading eyes. Qifeng became a little more diligent after he recovered. He sought out Carrie and the others to give him pointers on combat and marksmanship. Even in his sleep, he practiced piloting the virtual cabin. The experience this time was a pretty big blow to him. After the disappearance incident at the City of Trade, everyone realized that this was no longer the era when people didn't even dare to touch the squads of the Big Four. After dealing with Qifeng and Shueqio, Silen returned to his room and called Cheto over. Together, they read the chip's contents. Since he was bored, Hui Mao also joined in. There was a lot of information hidden in the 2 sets of DNA, but even Silen was shocked by what he saw. There were too many people connected to Miracle Corporation, and there were some politicians who looked like they were worried about their allies and their people. In fact, they had secretly supplied Miracle Corporation with a lot of experimental subjects that came from unorthodox sources. The 13 backward sectors were especially populated by people. After all, most of the planets there were underdeveloped, and losing a few thousand people wouldn't affect them at all. It was possible to analyze the factional struggles between the political groups and the League of Stars' military from the list and its contents. Although Silen couldn't do anything with these lists right now, it might come in handy in the future. To be honest, Silen was a little disappointed. The Fuji-Hara family wasn't included in the list. What kind of existence was the Hara family? Shoten had just finished reading the chip's contents when he received an urgent message and hurried to the main starship's conference room. It was a meeting. What happened this time? Silen put away the chip and went to the main starship. What's wrong? Silen asked. Shoten looked at the lieutenant commanders and pressed a button. A light screen appeared on the conference table and displayed a video. It was a video reported by a very influential media in the League of Stars. Olilo's cage? Silen thought. He knew that the video was related to Olilo's cage the moment he saw it. Shoten might know a little about Olilo's cage, but the other lieutenant commanders didn't. That being said, Shoten briefly explained some things about Olilo during the meeting. He didn't go into detail though. He only explained the important points. If the conflict 50 years ago was about the universal energy, White Knight, then this time it was about another matter altogether. Moreover, it was under the military's control. Just as Hui Mao had predicted, Hu Landu and Ji Feihong obtained an Olilo star map fragment from Miracle. Adding that the military already had such star map fragments, they pieced together the star map, found the key, and opened Olilo's cage. However, they didn't expect that Olilo's cage would be like this after it was opened. In the myth of creation, one of Olilo's cages was the god's back garden that represented a fairyland. Surprisingly, the location of this god's back garden was actually a place in Sector Z. A lot of astronomers had once studied Sector Z, but due to the harsh space environment, their understanding of Sector Z was still at an elementary stage. However, a long time ago, some researchers had discovered a black hole area in Sector Z. What they saw through their binoculars was a large black area, and none of the probes they sent out had returned. Some said that it was a black hole, but according to the data provided by the probes on the outside, it wasn't a black hole. However, there was no other explanation. Those who were lucky enough to enter that area never came out again. The moment they entered the black area, all communication was cut off, and it was a permanent cut. Therefore, the League of Stars didn't have high restrictions on the development and adventuring of Sector Z. Sometimes, they would even encourage hunter regiments and adventurers to enter the area, and then buy the information from these hunter regiments and adventurers at a high price. But now, no one had expected that the black hole area was actually one of Olilo's. Since the military had publicized this footage, it meant that they either had the place firmly under their control, and the reason they released this footage was to increase their influence in the League of Stars, or they had run into an unsolvable problem and needed to find a solution from the public's hands. We don't know the specifics, but I've contacted the A-team. They said that 2 of our squads are to go there, and that the rest of Vanguard will receive us when the time comes. Shotten told the A-Team's message to them, but Silen's thoughts weren't on it. He already knew what the A-Team's focus was, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The God's Back Garden, that represented a fairyland. The name alone was enough to tell that there would be a lot of rare things inside, and it must be beautiful. The released footage didn't reveal anything. The military didn't release the scene inside, and only the general appearance of the black hole area after it brightened up. This was the first Olillo's cage to be opened in so many years. Not even that White Knight had truly opened it before. As the first Olillo's cage to be opened, the matter behind it must be unimaginably complicated. No one could say for sure if the incident from 50 years ago would repeat itself, especially after the incident at Sector S. Silen thinks that Mist and Wuxia were the ones who had been too quiet after the incident at Sector S, as if they had never appeared in the first place. There was also Azrael. Every incident involving Azrael was devastating. Silen had a feeling that these guys would all appear at God's Back Garden this time. No matter what, we will cancel our previous mission plan and head to Sector Z with the 3rd Earth Division Squadron. Shotten said solemnly. Since the arrangements were made, the other lieutenant commanders had nothing more to say. After the meeting was adjourned, they would have their subordinates make preparations. In truth, everyone in the 6th Division had a strange feeling towards Sector Z. After all, their previous experience at Sector Z was too tragic. But as hunters, they had to get used to it. Silen, you stay. Just as Silen stood up and was about to leave, Shotten stopped him. After the other lieutenant commanders had left, Shotten asked, "What do you think about this incident?" "What do I think?" "Tell me what you think." Actually, we didn't see much from our position. The A squad has never interfered with the squad's business, and if they did, it would be a big deal. Since the A squad has asked us to do this, we will go. However, there are some questions that I still want to understand. Shotten said with a frown on his chair. Silen shook his head. I'm not in a position to comment on the Olillo cage, but I think the A squad sent us to support them in this incident. Shotten nodded. He had considered this as well. It was fine as long as they weren't cannon fodder. With the style of the upper echelons of the 4 great hunter regiments, they usually wouldn't let their subordinates be cannon fodder. If they did, it would be very difficult to absorb new blood as a supplement in the future. Our B squadron isn't the only one going over this time. I believe that the other B squadrons will also go over one after another. Since Vanguard has done this, the other 3 of the Great 4 will also do the same. This way, the implications will be much wider. If the military intends to have a dispute, once a fight breaks out, it will definitely cause great damage to the entire JIL. They won't do such a stupid thing. Shotten had thought about all the aspects Silen had mentioned before, but after Silen gave him a confirmation, Shotten also let out a small sigh of relief. After all, the 6th Division had developed to its current level after much difficulty. If they were to suffer another great blow, Shotten would vomit blood. After speaking for a while more, Silen finally left the meeting room and went back to inform everyone about the upcoming formation and things to pay attention to. There was no need to emphasize it any further, and everyone quickly got into the mood. Sector Z was a sector that left a deep impression on them. If they weren't prepared, they might lose their lives. After giving out orders, Silen returned to his room and closed his eyes to think on his bed. There were many things he wouldn't tell Shotten directly. It would expose too much of himself. Silen wasn't ready to take out the 2 Olillo star map fragments he had yet. Now wasn't the time yet, and taking them out would only bring destruction to the entire 6th Division. As he thought, Silen felt a little tired and slowly fell asleep. Who's talking? In a daze, 2 voices appeared in Silen's mind. Other than the voices, Silen also vaguely felt a familiar and strong magnetic field change, air pressure change, and a sudden change in temperature that rose more than 50 degrees in a second before falling below 0. His surroundings were dark, and he couldn't see anything. He could only hear the hazy voices, the sounds of fighting, the strange gunshots, and the strange yet familiar energy fluctuations. Suddenly, Sillin felt a heavy blow to his abdomen, shattering all the voices and sensations. Sillin abruptly opened his eyes and saw Hui Mao bouncing on his stomach. Letting out a long breath and wiping the sweat off his forehead, Sillin mumbled, "What the hell are you doing?" We stopped bouncing when it saw that Sillin had woken up. It stared at Sillin from head to toe with its round cat eyes and moved its ears a little. Then, it said with a grateful look on its face, "You were very strange just now. You looked like you were in hibernation, but your heartbeat was very fast and irregular, and you were sweating a lot. Look at you, you're wet, sticky, and dirty. You didn't respond when I called you. That's why I did it." Hearing Hui Mao's words, Sillin was stunned. Hypnosis. Sillin thinks laughed. He had hypnotized others so many times, but he didn't expect that he would be the one being hypnotized. If his analysis was correct, the person who hypnotized him was one of the two voices he heard at that time. As long as Sillin thinks thought about what happened at that time, he would be affected by the voice and would not be able to calmly analyze what happened at that time. However, Sillin was puzzled as to why that person chose to hypnotize him instead of killing him directly. It should be known that Sillin did not have the slightest ability to resist at that time. Moreover, in that kind of situation, it was almost impossible for him to survive. Sillin sat up and scratched Hui Mao's chin. "Thanks." Hui Mao narrowed his eyes and snorted. "You had a nightmare, right?" "I knew it. I wasn't the only one who had a nightmare." "What was your nightmare about?" Sillin asked as he scratched Hui Mao's chin. At the mention of this, Hui Mao's beard trembled. "It was about fish biscuits. That day, I dreamt that all the fish biscuits in my cupboard grew legs and ran away. That's why you ate them all the next day." No wonder he saw this glutton squatting there and eating a cupboard full of fish biscuits that day. The floor was covered in crumbs, and Sillin had to clean it for a long time before he could get rid of the fishy smell. "I didn't have that dream again after I ate them," Hui Mao said proudly. "Proud my ass. What an idiot." Sillin was utterly speechless towards this cat. "All right, are we still going to the planet where we discovered the special energy mine at Sector Z?" Hui Mao asked expectantly. "When we reach the edge of Sector Z, we will decide the best sailing route. If it's not on our way, then we won't go. If it's on our way, then we can go and see how the planet has been modified. I hope it's on our way. I miss the fish there. If it's on our way, then let's go and get more living creatures." While Sillin and the others were sailing towards Sector Z, many people from the 4 great hunter regiments were also rushing towards Sector Z. At that time, it would be the true gathering of the 4 great hunter regiments. No one could say for sure what kind of collision would occur, but one thing was for sure. This time, it would be the most influential gathering in the entire League of Stars. Chapter 202. The God's Back Garden that the military had just opened was located at the center of Sector Z. The strange thing was that after this black hole area was lit up, the space environment of Sector Z underwent a 180-degree change. The ordinary magnetic field anomaly had also gradually stabilized, and the occasional large-scale ion storms had mostly stopped since the activation of God's Back Garden. The existence of the former black hole area was actually a form of protection for Sector Z. Sector Z was incredibly rich in resources, and while the special energy or Sillin and the 6th Division might not necessarily exist on the other planets in Sector Z, there were definitely a lot of them that were of similar grade. Once Sector Z's space environment became ordinary, then it was undoubtedly a huge piece of fat meat. The League of Stars' military alone would not be able to swallow it all. This was probably one of the reasons why the military had announced all of this directly. According to the news that the League of Stars' 10 great business families represented by the Andryra family, the 4 great hunter regiments, and some other high-ranking hunter regiments and famous adventurer groups had all received an invitation from the military to discuss how to split this huge cake. When the Dark Triangle was no longer the Dark Triangle, and Sector Z was developed by the various forces, the fate of Sector Z would change from then on. It was not hard to imagine that Sector Z would no longer be one of the 13 backward sectors after this incident. It would become a developed sector, and the 10 trade sectors would become the 11 trade sectors. Due to the change in Sector Z's space environment and the military's direct permission, Cylin and the others' entry into Sector Z was very smooth. According to the star map, that so-called God's back garden is located in the triangle's Sector Z, and it is at the same distance from every vertex of the triangle. Yudi explained some of the results of his calculations to the crowd. This means that this area may be artificially controlled. It would be too much of a coincidence if it's natural. Beaver said. Everyone's thoughts were more or less the same. The real question was, who exactly developed this area? Who had the ability to produce such results? Carrie scratched his head. Does this mean that the lit area controls the entire Sector Z's space environment? When this area was still a black hole, Sector Z's space environment was so bad, but it stabilized after it was lit. I don't think so. Cylin said, the worse the environment is, the better it is for the creation of special energy ores. The fact that there are so many special energy ores, special species, and rare metals in Sector Z means that Sector Z's environment is different from other sectors. I agree with Lieutenant Cylin's opinion. Yudi switched the image on the light screen, and Sector Z's history appeared. This history may not be complete, and there are obvious traces of embellishment, but the most important thing is that Sector Z's harsh environment has always existed. Cylin knew about Olillo's incident more than 1,000 years ago, but there were records about Sector Z even earlier. At the time, Sector Z was still the famous Dark Triangle, and it was like this even before the Alliance was founded. According to the history Yudi released, there were no records about Sector Z's black hole at the time. Although it bore the name Dark Triangle, there was no explanation about the black hole at the center. Sector Z's black hole appeared more than 1,000 years ago, and it was also when Olillo appeared. Xiao Shang rubbed his chin. Sigh, do you guys think that a higher civilization had appeared there before? Otherwise, even the League of Stars wouldn't be able to achieve such a feat right now, would they? Yudi glanced sideways at him and said, we'll know if it's a higher civilization after we go there. If it's a higher civilization, we can see it clearly from the building traces there. Cylin looked carefully at the records about Sector Z on the image. It was a record from 1,000 years ago. Something's not right. Cylin pointed at the description of Sector Z. No matter how I look at it, the records are even scarier than the Sector Z we know. If that's the case, we couldn't have traveled safely at the time, and we couldn't even stay at the borders of Sector Z. Yudi nodded. I've always thought that the people of that era were exaggerating things, but looking at it now, it may be true that the records are true. It's just that the center of Sector Z had improved after it appeared, and in order to hide that area, someone had used certain methods to make Sector Z's cosmic environment turn hostile once more. But that area is real, so no matter how they tried to hide it, Sector Z is no longer as hostile as it was 1,000 years ago. Something suddenly became clear in Cylin's mind. The Wonderland Olillo was talking about wasn't just that lit-up area, but the entire Sector Z. The lit-up area was admittedly the core, but that area's existence was to improve Sector Z. Once it was improved, the entire Sector Z would become a fertile land. This was a huge gift. In reality, the conclusion of Cylin's squad's discussion was more or less the same as the military's analysis. Since the military possessed more information, they were certain of this conclusion, unlike Cylin's squad who were only guessing. After a period of flight, the 3rd B Squadron and the 6th Division arrived at the coordinates given by the A Squadron at the same time. At the time, the image released by the military was blurry, and no one could see the full picture of the lit-up area clearly. But now that they saw it with their own eyes, it was truly amazing. There was a star in its prime in this area, and the planets orbiting the star each had their own unique characteristics. Among them was a giant planet with a rank A habitability. There was a satellite belt around this planet, and on these satellites were some asteroids with rank B and C habitability. However, both the satellite belt and the giant planet were guarded by the military right now. The few planets with rank C habitability and above were all under the military's control. Seeing the military forces dispatched by the League of Stars, there was no way they could keep this a secret even if they didn't announce it to the public. The most amazing thing was that there was a platform between this giant planet and the satellite belt. Yes, a man-made platform that was much bigger than the spaceport Scylla had seen before. It was obvious that this was the spaceport of this giant planet. The spaceports he had seen before were like fishing boats compared to an aircraft carrier. There were many fortress-like buildings on this platform-shaped spaceport. The buildings were surrounded by energy shields, and the military starships, fighters, and aircrafts were parked in the open areas. Under the flashing light of the energy shields and the illumination of the star, the entire spaceport flashed with a mesmerizing light. It was incomparably dazzling. Who the hell built all of this? It's too fucking cool. Say, how cool would it be if Vanguard's spaceport was built like this? Carrie wanted to stick his face to the display screen. Although Yudi was also very surprised by this spaceport, he still mercilessly attacked Carrie's words. If Vanguard's spaceport was built like this, how much energy would it consume every day? We don't have as much capital as the military. Carrie curled his lips, but he didn't retort. That giant planet was definitely out of the question. Cheto and Huimao could feel the planet's domineering defense network just from its periphery. The coordinates given to them by the A Squadron were located on a rank B habitability asteroid in the satellite belt around the largest planet. Although the planet was marked as a rank B habitability planet, Scylla felt that the environment here was even better than the rank B habitability planets in other sectors. If it was just a little bit better, it would reach the requirements of a rank A habitability planet. This kind of environment was already very good for Scylla and the others. The A Squadron had built a temporary spaceport on the outskirts of the planet. Looking at the two starships parked inside the spaceport, it was obvious that some B squadrons had already arrived. They weren't the first to arrive. After parking the starships, Scylla and the others boarded a spaceplane and flew to the asteroid. Some fortresses had already been built on the asteroid. It was obvious that they were going to be stationed there for a long time. Scylla and the others below the rank of lieutenant commander were resting at their assigned places. As the captain, Schotten had already rushed over to report in. A communication network had already been built on the asteroid. Everyone had adjusted the frequency of their communicators so that it would be easier to communicate on the planet. However, Scylla had just stopped when someone informed him that a guest had come to visit. Me? Who is it? Scylla asked in puzzlement. The person in charge of notifying the guest had an odd look on his face. You'll know when you come over. The A Squadron had built a reception point on the asteroid. Inside this reception point, a certain someone was holding a cup of tea with his legs crossed and a book open on his lap. He was drinking tea and reading at the same time. Most of the people in charge of the reception point were Vanguard's A Squadron members. Of course, they hadn't reached Songba Leruo's level yet. Not every A Squadron member was promoted from a captain to a captain. Although the youngsters in charge of the reception point were usually a little arrogant, they restrained their arrogance in front of the person who was leisurely drinking tea. Although there was no kindness or malice in their eyes, there was a hint of admiration. A 16 or 17-year-old girl was talking to her friends about the person sitting there. Hey, did you see the emblem on his chest? One of the girl's eyes were full of stars. Another girl replied, How could I not see it? It blinded my eyes. Gentleman, knowledgeable. He doesn't look much older than us, right? He's already a one-star academician at such a young age. A one-star academician at the League of Stars Research Institute. What's wrong with his head? But usually, a gentleman isn't necessarily what he looks like on the inside. A gentleman is nothing more than a patient wolf. What's there to be afraid of? Patient wolf. Forget it. A few boys next to them rolled their eyes. Hey, you two, be more reserved. What's there to be reserved about? The two girls sneered. It's not easy to find a satisfactory target. Yeah, do you think the child's IQ would be very high if you were to have a child like this? Last time, I heard someone say that the child's IQ is more related to the mother's. How can that be? Last time, they said that my IQ was close to that of a modern ape. Don't be afraid. In terms of combat strength, they are like eggs in the hands of a modern ape in front of you. The boys around them sweated profusely as they listened. They glanced at the person who was still sitting there reading peacefully as if he didn't hear what was going on around him. They sighed in their hearts. Such determination. Sillin walked in while the juniors in the home team were discussing. Seeing the person who looked like a senior academic sitting there reading and drinking tea, Sillin said in pleasant surprise, "I didn't expect you to come." As he spoke, Sillin strode over. C.I. Jincheng, who was sitting there drinking tea, raised his eyes to look at Sillin. He elegantly put down his teacup, closed his book and placed it beside him. Then he stood up and gave Sillin a flying kick. The surrounding crowd. The word gentleman was directly erased from everyone's minds. Sillin, who was kicked, was sent flying in a parabola. But not long after, he walked in with a chuckle and gave C.I. Jincheng a hug. Then he hammered C.I. Jincheng's shoulder and pointed at the emblem on his chest. "Yo, not bad. You're an academician now." C.I. Jincheng looked at the face in front of him expressionlessly. It was just as Knight and Lung had said, "Stupid no matter how I look at it." Patting the leg of his pants, C.I. Jincheng said, "Aren't you going to invite me over to your place? We need to have a good talk." "Of course, academician C.I., please." C.I. Jincheng suddenly paused after taking 2 steps and said, "Surimo has also been invited over. He's on that main planet right now." Speaking of Surimo, Sillin really didn't know how to face him. Although he had sent a few coded messages in between, sending messages and meeting him were 2 different things. If he met him in person, his already stupid face would probably become as stupid as a pig's head. "Oh right, I forgot to tell you," C.I. Jincheng revealed a gloating smile. "I've already told Surimo before I came here. I think in another, 2 hours, Surimo should be done with his work by then." After Sillin and C.I. Jincheng had left, the youngsters gathered together once more. "Hey, who was that guy just now?" "I don't know, he looked a little stupid." "TSK, look at your eyesight. That's called concealment. You guys actually don't know who that guy is? He's a helicopter member who was internally selected beforehand." "So you're saying that guy is at the captain level?" a girl asked. "I don't think so. But I heard from my father that that guy was internally selected by the higher-ups a long time ago. As long as he's willing, he can directly enter the A Squadron at any time. He's that good." Anyone who was promoted to the A Squadron from a branch team was someone with true strength. No matter what kind of background you had in the Vanguard, you had absolute strength. "I really didn't expect there to be such a person in the branch." "You don't know, do you? Let me tell you guys." Sillin did not know what those youngsters would say about him. Right now he was facing C.I. Jincheng's fierce criticism. As expected of an academician-level figure of the League of Stars Research Institute. He had probably traveled to various sectors to give lectures many times already. After a series of criticism, he didn't even drink a cup of water, and it looked like he was going to continue. Hui Mao stared at C.I. Jincheng on a cabinet not far away with a pair of round eyes. Was that the researcher Sillin was talking about? Although Sillin said that this was a good researcher, but were there good researchers in the League of Stars? That being said, watching Sillin get scolded was a very satisfying thing. While C.I. Jincheng was listing out the troublesome things that had happened during the years when Sillin played dead, Sillin's communicator rang again. Mo Heng, old Mo had arrived. Sillin did not need to go to the reception area to pick him up. Old Mo had volunteered to come personally, and with old Mo's status, naturally he would be accompanied. Sillin's face twitched. It would be fine if they came one by one, but he would probably drown in their saliva if they piled up together. Hearing that old Mo was coming over, C.I. Jincheng stopped talking. He picked up his tea, took a sip, crossed his legs, and put on an expression that said, "Good luck." People like Sillin who understood old Mo's temper knew that the old man could put on airs and be amiable normally. But in the words of Seven Lights Vice Headmaster and Ting, he was a senior academic ruffian. Speaking of which, old Mo had already thought things through when he received the military's invitation. There was no doubt that the newly opened God's Back Garden was attractive, but at the same time, he also knew that various major forces had also been invited, and all of them had mobilized a lot of manpower. That little bastard disciple of his would probably be among them. That was why old Mo had arrived very early. At the time, Vanguard's B squadrons had not arrived yet. The old man took a general look at the newly opened area, and just as he had analyzed earlier, it was not built by a higher civilization. While he was arranging everything, he received C.I. Jincheng's message. He could not sit still the moment he heard that the 6th Division had arrived. He was planning to supervise the current project to completion, but his hands just couldn't stop itching. Since he could not calm down and supervise the project, he let another engineering scholar take over and sent him to the little planet where Vanguard was located. Now that old Mo had arrived, the ones to receive him were definitely not the juniors. The A Squadron had specifically sent someone over, and the one to receive old Mo was one of Vanguard's high-ranking officials, Su Ali. Su Ali's status and influence in Vanguard was much greater than Songba Leruo and Bart's. The fact that this high-ranking official showed up in person immediately shocked the youngsters at the reception point. They really did not expect that an important figure like Su Ali would personally come to visit them. Su Ali and old Mo could be considered old acquaintances. He sighed about the things that had happened over the years as he walked towards the 6th Division. Along the way, he ran into Bart and Songba Leruo, who had just returned from a mining planet. After exchanging greetings, the duo did not linger and headed straight for the 6th Division's temporary base. "What's going on? Why is that old man here?" Bart said while stroking his long beard. Songba Leruo did not answer. The corner of his lips curled meaningfully, and he turned around to continue walking. Over at the 6th Division's temporary base, Silin was rubbing his face thoughtfully when he suddenly heard a loud roar from outside. "Get your ass over here, Silin." Chapter 203. Mo Heng's roar immediately aroused the curiosity of the 6th Division and the 3rd B Squadron, who were resting in the neighboring building. They stretched their necks and looked over, and some of them even secretly adjusted their surveillance cameras and watched from inside the house. A few of the lieutenant commanders recognized Su Ali, so they were even more puzzled. Just what kind of person could make Su Ali accompany him so patiently? Behind Sir Mo were 2 people from the military, and there was also a team of guards at the reception point. The lowest rank of these guards was a major, and they were all here to protect Mo Heng. The 2 people following Mo Heng were both major generals. It was clear how influential Mo Heng was in the military. However, Su Ali was the only one who knew about this. The people of the 6th and 3rd B Squadrons did not know about this. None of the people protecting Mo Heng were wearing military uniforms or badges, but it was obvious from their movements that they were from the military. It was just that they did not know their ranks. Hearing Mo Heng's voice, Silin hurriedly walked out. It had been a few years since they last met, and to be honest, he missed the old man a lot. He had only seen Sir Mo's image in a few electronic magazines with high contribution points, but that was the side Sir Mo wanted others to see. The other side was only known to those close to him. For example, right now. When Mo Heng saw Silin walking out, he examined him from head to toe. Before this, Mo Heng had seen Silin's current appearance, but after seeing it in person, he still couldn't help but sigh. "Look at this kid's stupid face." Since there were a lot of people watching, Sir Mo was merciful enough to not make a move. "Let's talk inside." Mo Heng put his hands behind his back and walked straight inside with a straight face. "After you." Silin let out a sigh of relief. If Mo Heng were to pull his face right now, Silin's prestige would probably drop to 0. The fact that he was pulling a straight face proved that Mo Heng wasn't really angry right now. On the contrary, Sir Mo must be plotting something. This was what Silin guessed based on his understanding of Mo Heng. As expected, the moment he entered, Mo Heng's hand reached out from behind his back and grabbed Silin's face. Squatting on a tall cabinet not far away, Hui Mao's mouth was wide open. "Oh my, this old man is even crueler than Ci." He actually pinched his face. The faces of the 2 major generals behind Mo Heng twitched. Old Master Mo's old habits were acting up again. They had seen with their own eyes how Elder Mo had pinched the face of their boss, the famous general of the League of Stars, until it was red. Su Ali, who had followed them in, looked at the master and disciple pair with great interest. He had only heard a few things about Silin from Bart, Nada, and Songba Lerwo. Even Ji Feng had praised Silin, so he couldn't tell much about Silin at such a close distance. "You're really heartless, aren't you?" "If you say so, then it must be." Elder Mo continued to reprimand Silin until he was done. Seeing the red marks on Silin's face, even Suo Li and the two generals felt pain in their balls and faces. Then, as expected, there was a barrage of criticism and reprimand. He had finally said all the words he had been holding back for so long, and he had scolded everything that needed to be scolded. He beckoned with his hand, and a major general carefully brought over the box he was carrying and a spherical instrument. The moment he saw this, Silin knew that Mo Heng was going to check his homework. Silin hadn't used the instrument to measure the overall accuracy for years, but it shouldn't be lower, right? Silin brought Mo Heng to a temporary workshop, and Ci Jincheng came over to join in the fun. Hui Mao wouldn't miss this opportunity either. Cheto, who was in the next room, didn't need to go over to watch. He could know what was going on inside through the surveillance network and the monitors in the workshop. Also, he was responsible for destroying the recording after this incident. It was Silin's order. Mo Heng carried the box over and put it on the table. Then, he carefully took out a pile of parts inside. They were all finer parts. He pressed a button on the circular instrument, and it floated up to reveal a scanning hole in Silin's direction. At the same time, a light screen popped up on top of the prototype, displaying some basic test data. Even Suo Li was a little surprised when he saw the data. It wasn't a lot of parts, but there were almost 100,000 of them. Needless to say, Silin began to move after he pushed aside the parts and took a look. A major general brought over a chair and let Mo Heng sit down. Then, everyone's eyes were subconsciously drawn to Silin's movements. Every time Mo Heng watched Silin assemble, it was like he was admiring a rare work of art. Mo Heng had used one of Silin's assembling videos as a teaching example, but it was more of a deterrent than a guide. After all, there were too few people who could do what Silin did, and not even some of the great instructors in Seven Lights could do it. After Silin had left, every Seven Lights student who had seen the assembling video tried to inquire about the person who did it, but all the instructors who knew the inside story shut their mouths at the same time and said that it was someone related to Mo Heng. Until now, the video was hailed as a classic by the students of Seven Lights. Mo Heng knew from experience that Silin had definitely improved without even looking at the instrument. He would know the answer he wanted as long as he moved his eyes away to look at the data on the light screen of the instrument. But Mo Heng could not bear to move his eyes away. It was undeniable that watching Silin assemble was a pleasure in itself. Unlike the sense of urgency some so-called senior engineers and technicians had when they were assembling, Silin's movements looked very comfortable to the eyes. It was as natural as breathing. However, in reality, Silin's movements were very fast, so fast that it was easy to overlook some of his movements. Even so, it didn't affect the smoothness of his movements at all. Different people, different levels of strength, and different angles of view would more or less miss some of his movements, but all of them were slowly attracted by Silin's hand movements without any prior agreement. At this time, no one in the audience would think about how this person was able to distinguish the order in which the parts were assembled, or why this person knew what parts to assemble without looking at the fitting parts. The audience's mind was actually very empty. As Silin's hands moved, the thoughts in their minds were unconsciously emptied out, and the only thing left in the empty world of their minds was an object that was slowly taking shape. 10 minutes later, a finger-thick, half-meter-long mechanical snake was assembled. The two major generals immediately shuddered. They had actually been distracted just now. If someone had tried to harm Mo Heng during this period of time, they would not have had the time to react at all. People like them who had gone through strict training and experienced countless battlefields actually had their thoughts emptied out. Although part of the reason was because they believed that Silin would not harm Sir Mo, as guards, they had still underestimated Silin. In the face of a person like Silin, even the slightest bit of negligence could put them in a passive position. Now they finally knew why Silin had entered the A-rank list of the military's secret files. The people around Mo Heng would certainly do some research on Silin. With their status in the military and the secret information provided by General Mo Qing, they naturally knew a lot of things that others did not know, especially about Sillin. At this time, they even wondered how long it would take for Sillin to enter the S-rank list. The assembled mechanical snake did not look like a mechanical snake at all. The special materials and precise assembly made the little snake look no different from a real one. It nimbly circled around Sillin's arm, raised its flat triangular head to look at Mo Heng and the others, and flicked out its tongue. Mo Heng swallowed. When Sillin's hand stopped moving, his mind was no longer on the little snake. He did not need a detector to test the snake's qualification. He could absolutely confirm that it was a high-rank qualification. Mo Heng tilted his head to look at the data displayed on the holographic screen. One of the columns showed a series of numbers. The first few times, the comprehensive accuracy reached the theoretical value of 98%, but after 3 steps, it reached 99%, and it had maintained this data since then. Mo Heng's old face was flushed with excitement. His mouth trembled, but he could not say a word. After taking a deep breath, he completely forgot to exhale. "Master, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, don't forget to exhale." Sillin hurriedly reminded Mo Heng. Mo Heng stood up abruptly. You. Mo Heng directly grabbed Sillin's face. After saying you for a long time, he still could not say you. His breathing quickened, causing the 2 major generals and Sua Li to be afraid that something had happened to the old man. "Master, breathe. Take a deep breath. Breathe slowly," Sillin said. "Slow my s." Mo Heng almost roared. The corner of Sua Li's mouth twitched. This was the behavior of a dignified 4-star academician. After Mo Heng let go of Sillin's face, he spun around in circles. Seeing this, Sillin and the others were puzzled. What was wrong with the old man? While Sillin was thinking, Mo Heng suddenly paused and pointed at Sillin. "You're coming with me to that planet in a moment. There's a mission." No one could dissuade Old Man Mo's words, so the 2 major generals did not try to dissuade him at all. Now that Mo Heng wanted to bring Sillin to that planet, he would definitely need the approval and permission of some people in the military. Old Man Mo would naturally contact the relevant personnel for those matters. They only needed to protect Old Man Mo. Mo Heng was a man of action. After making the decision, he had Sillin pack up his things and bring along any handy tools. Of course, this handy tool referred to tools related to assembly, not dangerous items such as firearms. After that, Mo Heng took out his communicator and started contacting people. Sua Li was dumbfounded by the sudden turn of events. He wasn't a member of that circle, and he didn't know what the theoretical 99% comprehensive accuracy meant. He might know a little, but he didn't know what it meant to people like Mo Heng, so he couldn't understand Mo Heng's feelings right now. While Sillin was packing up his tools, he sent a secret signal to Cheto. Cheto's eyes flashed for a moment before he deleted everything that had happened in the workshop just now. He had been paying close attention to the monitor all this time. Although the video had been deleted, the scene of Sillin assembling still existed in Cheto's memory bank. Unless he forcibly deleted it, the memory would always be there. At the same time, Cheto's eyes turned very subtle, and his fingers moved slightly. If Sillin was here, he would have noticed that his fingers were moving at the exact same frequency as when he was assembling just now. The only difference was that Cheto's movements weren't as big. It didn't take long for Mo Heng to finish contacting people. Then he nodded at Sillin and said, "Let's go." Sua Li was familiar with Mo Heng's personality, so he didn't mind Mo Heng's disregard. He shot Sillin a look and said, "Pay attention. Contact me if you need anything." Sillin nodded and left. C.I. Jincheng was one of the invited members of the League of Stars Research Institute, so he left with them. Hui Mao and Cheto didn't go with them. Setting aside whether or not the military would allow people like them to enter a planet like this, if they exposed themselves in front of the League of Stars Research Institute's academicians, it would be hard for them to get away. After all, their characteristics were too special. Mo Heng told Sillin about the so-called mission while he was taking Sillin to the planet. The academicians of the League of Stars Research Institute who were invited this time were people who had made contributions and influence in different fields. Right now, they were all conducting research in different places and regions. There were a total of 16 engineers like Moheng, and right now they were working on a machine the size of a small mountain. Due to their age, some of the senior academicians who were invited couldn't do everything by themselves. They had to take a break after a while, and during this break they would supervise and guide the work. The people they brought with them were all their favorite students, and they would guide them while they were working on the huge machine. However, Moheng didn't bring any students with him when he came to this planet, so he couldn't avoid the criticism of his old enemies. That was why Moheng gave Silin a good scolding when he saw him and vented his grievances. However, Moheng's arrogance when he got off the space plane surprised a few of his old colleagues. Silin was following beside Moheng while carrying a toolbox that wasn't fancy at all. His presence was low, and he looked pretty ordinary. He looked like an errand boy. But everyone who knew Moheng knew that he wouldn't let an ordinary errand boy follow him. The people who helped Moheng with the toolbox were all major generals. Moheng slowly walked over with his hands behind his back and stood with a few old academicians. He looked at the huge machine and nodded. "Silin, go ahead." Silin's stomach hurt when he heard this. Why did it sound like, "Close the door and let the dogs go"? A few old academicians who were resting next to him looked over in surprise. An old man who was also a 4-star academician thumped his leg and shouted, "Old ruffian who is this guy? You know, we can't let unrelated people in here." Those who could come in were, of course, approved, so they were definitely not unrelated people. The old man said this just to stop Moheng, and everyone understood this. Moheng didn't put on a straight face like before. Instead, he pretended to be calm and said, "This guy is old and can't move anymore. Let my disciple do it for him." These words surprised the old academicians. It was still the old man who asked first, "Old ruffian, when did you have a disciple?" Moheng looked up at the sky. "I've had a disciple for a long time." Hearing old man Mo's proud sigh and trying to pretend to be bitter, Silin's hand that was holding the box trembled. Look at him, it's as if having a disciple has been through the vicissitudes of life. The old academicians curled their lips and continued to pretend. For Moheng, this disciple who appeared in front of these leading academicians for the first time, the old academicians diverted part of their attention. Not only was Moheng's disciple mysterious, but he was also too young. So young that they couldn't trust his ability. After Silin walked over, he didn't do anything immediately. He put down the box and walked around the huge machine, attracting the attention of the old academician's disciples who were busy working. Seeing that his disciple was paying attention to old ruffian Mo's disciple, an old academician's face immediately darkened and he shouted, "Focus on your own work, why are you paying attention to others?" Moheng's eyes narrowed. "Sigh, some people are just born to attract attention." The other old academicians who were sitting there resting decided to directly filter out Moheng's words and didn't pay much attention to Silin. In any case, if he couldn't do anything, it would be a slap in the face for Moheng. Reality proved everything. Let's see how long that old ruffian can be smug for. Ignoring what the others thought, Silin walked around the huge hemispherical machine and thought for a while with a frown. Huimao once said that machines also had their own language, and the information they wanted to express could be understood by listening. This big machine was huge, complicated, and could even block scanners. Without understanding the principle and general structure, no one dared to work on it. So until now, there had been no substantial progress even with more than a dozen academicians personally working on it. They might be experienced in assembly, but when it came to the language of machines, they couldn't compare to Silin, so they wouldn't think in that direction. He carefully sensed the subtle movements caused by non-human activities in the surroundings. There weren't even any plants around, so the subtle movements should be caused by this huge machine. After being further stimulated by the chip, Silin's ability to listen to machine language had improved a lot. As his thoughts slowly settled, he could listen to some intermittent language. Silin converted these languages into shapes in his mind. And so, in Silin's mind, the big machine was surrounded by floating shapes from time to time. From the floating and moving trajectories of these shapes, Sillin came to one of the parts of the machine. The spot Sillin was looking for was nearly 10 meters above the ground. Activating his hoverboard, Sillin flew to the spot and pressed down. "Hey kid, don't touch it!" roared an old academician in exasperation. Impatient, young people are too impatient. Mo Hing didn't care. Being too impatient would only ruin things. He still needed to hone his skills. However, as soon as the old academician finished speaking, the huge, motionless, hemispherical machine split into a few petals like a flower and spread out from the point at the top. Mo Hing slapped his thigh excitedly. "Hey, look, it moved!" The old academicians rolled their eyes at the same time. Anyone with eyes would know that it was time to move. However, they had to admit that Mo Heng's mysterious disciple was indeed capable. Whether it was by coincidence or not, he did touch a key spot. This was as exciting as opening a shortcut in a maze. However, looking back at Mo Heng, the old academicians really wanted to remind this arrogant academic ruffian, "Mo, watch out for your arrogant tail." Chapter 204. Because of Sillin's actions, the project made great progress. This huge hemispherical machine was like a flower bud that took a small step forward. However, this small step was enough for everyone to see the general direction. To be able to become an academician of the League of Stars Research Institute, one's eyesight must be quite good. After the big machine moved, several old academicians quickly formulated the next steps based on the information collected before. The old academicians didn't have the time to stop Sillin's actions just now. Although it was a significant step, the project was just too important. They had no choice but to be as cautious as they could be, and they wouldn't allow Sillin to do whatever he wanted from now on. Under the guidance of several authoritative figures, each of the direct disciples had the intention of showing off their skills to gain face for their masters, trying their best to show off their most powerful side. The old academicians who were supervising the work nodded at the performance of their disciples. They all thought that their disciples were the best. Every engineering technician had their own assigned tasks. Everyone's assigned area was recorded, and there was a special monitor monitoring it not far away. Every area would be inspected again. If there was a problem, they could directly find the person in charge of that area. Even though the disciples were the ones who did the work, the main responsibility was still on the masters. This was because the masters would personally inspect the work after it was completed. The military wouldn't admit fault because their own equipment didn't detect any problems. They would still look for authoritative figures to take responsibility. This was something that Mo Heng didn't like. As the old academicians were talking, Sillin slowly walked over. Mo Heng glanced at him and grinned. He tried to make himself look more serious. "It's done." Sillin showed an honest smile. "It's done. Master, do you want to inspect it?" "Ahem, of course I have to inspect it. Don't cut corners by finishing it so quickly. If there's a problem, I won't forgive you." Mo Heng's words sounded harsh, but who in the room could not hear the smugness in his voice? As the first person to complete the work and Mo Heng's precious disciple, the old academicians were tired anyway. It was a good time to see what Mo Heng's disciple was capable of. Mo Heng didn't stop them. Instead, he was quite happy. He put his hands behind his back and walked over without Sillin's help. The old academicians behind him curled their lips. "Look at how cocky he is." When they arrived at the area that Sillin was in charge of, the old academicians could tell that it was definitely the work of an extremely professional. It could be said to be perfect. Even the old academicians couldn't guarantee that they could do a better job than the interface of the parts, the connection of the wires, and the placement of the small instruments. In fact, Sillin had already finished his work a long time ago. He had even studied the entire machine, but because he had only done the preliminary work, there was a limit to what he could study. After a while, he got bored and stood up to report to Mo Heng. He wondered what the other academicians would think if they knew the truth. He took the military equipment and inspected it. It was indeed of excellent quality. This time, Mo Heng's tail, which had been raised high up in the air, was about to reach the sky. Seeing that the old academicians had been silent all this time, and that he couldn't find any fault to scold. Mo Hung grinned and waved his hands. He pretended to be disgusted and said, all right. Don't think that you'll be fine just because you've completed the project. When we get back, massage this old man's legs and test your recent homework. Recent homework? What the hell is there to do recently? Silin rolled his eyes on the inside, but Silin was well aware of Mo Heng's desire to show off. After Mo Hung lay down on the recliner, he obediently massaged Mo Heng's legs. Aging was first manifested in one's feet and legs. Among people of the same age and gene rank, some would walk as if they were flying, while others would stagger. That was the difference. Moreover, the legs and knee joints had to bear the weight of the entire body. Over time, they would wear out and seriously affect the movement of the joints. As one grew older, the wear and tear would become more and more serious. Even someone like Mo Heng, who was once famous when he was young, had no choice but to accept his old age. His occupational disease was very obvious. His hands were fine when he worked selflessly, but the damage to his legs was more severe. His frequent menstrual cramps had also gradually shrunk. Back at Seven Lights, Silin would massage Mo Heng's legs from time to time. Until now, Mo Heng still felt that the healthcare machine's effect was inferior to Silin's massage. Sigh, my legs feel much more comfortable after every massage. My blood vessels are unblocked, and the soreness and weakness in my legs are greatly reduced. Mo Heng sighed. The few old academicians who had just returned to their seats pretended not to hear anything. Show off all you want. I'll pretend I didn't hear anything. It was only after Silin massaged Mo Heng's legs for a long time that the people on the other side finally finished their work. Because of the importance of this project, many people would rather slow down in order to make every step perfect. But the old academicians had to admit that there was still a gap between their engineering quality and Silin's even if they did so. In truth, they had already performed very well and exceeded their usual standards. But with Silin as a comparison, they were not as eye-catching. Although the gap was there, the overall engineering quality of this step was still excellent. Are you ready? Someone on the other side made a gesture. All right. Start the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Connect. Following the old academician's order, this step of the project began. The energy was connected, and the engineering areas began to come into play. The huge hemispherical shape that opened a little at the top began to change. This big flower bud bloomed into a big arc, and its appearance also changed, revealing some control surfaces that everyone was very familiar with. Everything was difficult at the beginning. The most difficult part had been completed, and the rest of the project would be easier. There was no need for these people to fully invest in it. The things to pay attention to in the early stage and some of the working principles of this big machine had been annotated, so the people inside the military should be able to handle it after taking over. Originally, someone in the military wanted Mo Heng to participate in the later stages of the project, but Mo Heng refused. This time, he did not want to get involved in the internal affairs of the military. If he caused trouble, it would also affect Mo Qing. Mo Heng had a deep understanding of the problem and was quite decisive. He would immediately cut off what needed to be cut off. After working for half a day, Mo Heng was also tired. Although he wanted to talk to Silin for a while, for the sake of Mo Heng's health, Silin refused and let Mo Heng rest. After being invited to this planet to do the project, Mo Heng had not had a good rest. When he was young, he could work hard, but when he was old, he could not. After Silin repeatedly promised that he wouldn't disappear for no reason this time, Mo Heng finally showed mercy and let Silin leave. In fact, the main reason was that Mo Heng was in a good mood today. He was in a pretty good mood. He was exhilarated and proud of himself. Even when he was sleeping, his mouth was upturned. The person that Mo Heng sent to send Silin back was one of the two major generals. Although this person was still expressionless, at least when he looked at Silin, his eyes were not as cold and alienated as before. They also admired Silin's ability, so it was no wonder that Mo Heng wanted him. A person that could make those old academicians and old authorities speechless was definitely a rare person. Originally, the plan was to send Silin to the small planet Vanguard in the satellite belt, but due to the development of the situation, he was sent to another part of the planet instead. A few hours after Sillin was brought out, the military sent out a message saying that they were going to organize a meet and greet. All the invited parties would gather at the stated location. Of course, the people attending the meet and greet were still the leaders of each party. They were allowed to bring a group of people with them, but the number of people and weapons were limited. The B squadrons of Vanguard stayed on the small planet in the satellite belt, but Songba Leruo and Bart had brought Huimao and Cheto with them. Sillin could go there directly. Right now, part of the teams dispatched by each party had arrived at the mentioned coordinates on the planet. As for the remaining forces of each party, they naturally had their own arrangements. No one was an idiot, and they were all prepared. They wouldn't trust the military completely, not to mention that there were some people who often clashed with each other among these invited forces. Only when they were prepared would they be able to fight. The meeting point this time was specially circled out by the military for the purpose of a meet and greet. That being said, it would be best if the space plane didn't fly into the meeting point. After all, the space plane belonged to the military. If Sillin were to walk out of the military space plane and return to Vanguard in front of everyone's eyes, there was no telling what kind of trouble they would cause. That was why Sillin got off the space plane when he was still some distance away from the meeting point. He activated his hoverboard and flew toward the meeting point. Right now, he didn't know what the leaders were doing. The meeting hadn't started yet, and he didn't see a single big shot in sight. However, the small fries that came along with him were already talking to each other. You could see people wandering around outside everywhere. Sillin's arrival didn't attract any attention. It was too common for people of Sillin's age to wander around everywhere. In this place, most of the hunters were from the 4 great families, but he basically didn't know anyone he met. Sillin flew along the coordinates he obtained, and when he passed by a certain place, he suddenly sensed an unusual movement behind him. He dodged a whip and adjusted his hoverboard. Then he skillfully hooked the hoverboard and stood still. The person who attacked him didn't seem to have any intention of attacking further. There was no killing intent in that attack just now, and it was more like a greeting. That was why Sillin didn't make a move. After he quickly steadied himself, he adjusted his hoverboard and hovered in place. Then, he turned around and looked at the person who attacked him behind him. "Yo, it really is you," the person said with joy in his voice. The corner of Sillin's eyebrows rose. A familiar face. "Long time no see, Huzi." The person who attacked Sillin was none other than the crossdresser, Huzi, he met in Sector S's prison. Sillin had a good impression of Huzi. At the very least, she didn't run away alone when the passage door closed, and tried to pull Sillin out with a whip instead. This meant that Huzi was a good person. Right now, Huzi had changed her attire. She was still dressed as a man, and her mustache was curled at the sides. She stood on the hoverboard and grinned at Sillin. Looking at the area below him, Sillin asked, "You're from Fire Phoenix?" This area was assigned to the people of Sector S as a foothold, and right below it was Fire Phoenix's territory. In Sector S, Fire Phoenix was just like Flying Snake. They were one of the most famous forces in Sector S. Last time Sillin Halong's route wasn't in Fire Phoenix's territory, but he didn't think that this Huzi would appear there from so far away. Moreover, he didn't appear as a prisoner or a prison guard. There was no one from Fire Phoenix in that prison. Of course, Sillin wouldn't ask about the secret entanglements between the forces in Sector S. He wouldn't get a true answer even if he did. "Yeah, I'm from Fire Phoenix. It's fate that we meet again, and we're comrades who have gone through thick and thin together. Let me formally introduce myself. My name is Shanhua, and I'm here with Fire Phoenix to join in the fun." A pause later, Shanhua asked, "What's your name? Also, which force are you from? From the looks of it, you don't look like you'll be staying at the forces in Sector S." "My name is Sillin, I'm from Vanguard." Sillin didn't plan to hide this. "Oh, one of the Great Four, Vanguard? You're pretty famous. I didn't think you'd have such a big background. I heard that the people of the Great Four who can come here are all important people in the Great Four. I'm not really an important person. It's pure coincidence that I'm here." Shanhua didn't believe Sillin's words, but she didn't plan to dwell on this question any longer. Instead, she asked, "Sai, I'm bored right now. Do you have any fun recommendations?" "No, I'm about to report back. I don't have time. Tisk, boring." While they were talking, another person flew over from below. However, this person didn't come from Fire Phoenix's territory, but from Flying Snake's territory. "A flying snake?" Shanhua said curiously. Based on her understanding of Flying Snake Tsujiu, this guy usually didn't pay attention to outsiders. "Sillin, long time no see," Tsujiu said with a smile. Tsujiu saw Sillin and Shanhua in the air when he was bored and looked around with his binoculars just now. His main reason for flying over was still Sillin. He didn't have a good chat with him last time at Sector S because there were too many things to do, and he was busy for a long time after that. He didn't have the chance to pay attention to Sillin Halong's movements, and by the time he was free, these two people were nowhere to be seen. It was rare for him to meet someone he knew here, so of course he had to come over and say hello. "Long time no see, Tsujiu." Sillin smiled and fist-bumped the flying Tsujiu. "You know each other?" Shanhua looked at the duo and saw the smile on Tsujiu's face. Their relationship wasn't bad, at least better than her relationship with Sillin. They were familiar with each other. "Since when did Flying Snake and Vanguard contact each other?" "We met each other by chance when we went to Sector S last time," Sillin said. He didn't mention anything about Tsujiu being rescued from danger. Tsujiu and Sillin were grateful for Sillin's explanation. After all, no one was willing to announce those things to the public, let alone a fellow Bighead Phoenix Flame of Sector S. Tsujiu looked around and asked, "Why don't I see Lung? Is he here too?" "He should be, but not in this area. I'm from Vanguard, and he's on the other side. Why don't you give me your communicator's contact number, and I'll tell you when I get in touch with him." The military had set up a special local communication network in this assembly area, and there was a special frequency coverage in the assembly area. Sure. Leaving aside the fact that Sillin Helong had saved Tsujiu's life, befriending Sillin Helong would be beneficial to Tsujiu's own development. Tsujiu believed in his own judgment. Shanhua also came over to exchange contact numbers. She was pretty bored here, and she heard that she would be staying here for a few more days. The meeting wouldn't end in a day. Many of his old friends hadn't come, and Shanhua was a person who couldn't stay idle. It wasn't easy for her to meet someone she knew, someone she could call an acquaintance. Adding Flying Snake, yes, and that Lung they mentioned, it shouldn't be too boring. After exchanging contact numbers, Sillin continued to fly towards Vanguard. After Sillin flew away, Shanhua followed Tsujiu with interest. "Hey, how did you two meet? Do you want me to exchange information with you?" Tsujiu glanced at her. "You didn't tell him that you're the disciple of the current Fire Phoenix?" "I didn't." Shanhua raised her thumb and stroked her mustache. Many people would have thoughts about her identity as the disciple of the current Fire Phoenix. It was precisely because of this that Shanhua often put on makeup and left home to roam the world. Fire Phoenix also let Shanhua's behavior be. This was also a form of growth, and it wasn't good to keep her by her side. "Is there a need?" Shanhua looked at Tsujiu. Tsujiu didn't reply. When Sillin arrived at Vanguard's area, he could already see the cat sitting on Songba Leruo's hat from afar. Right now, Hui Mao was scratching his paw impatiently while Bart was teasing him with his long mustache. At first, Hui Mao just shook his ears and ignored Bart's teasing, but in the face of Bart's persistent harassment, Hui Mao finally moved his paw. While Hui Mao was feeling depressed because the B squadrons couldn't come to the meeting point, Bart and Songba Leruo expressed their willingness to bring Hui Mao and Cheto to the meeting point. Hui Mao thought for a moment and decided to tag along. With Bart and Songba Leruo's guarantee, Hui Mao wasn't afraid of the military or the monstrous scientists attacking him. But when he arrived, he discovered that he didn't even know them. Just as Hui Mao was about to shave the old bastard's mustache with his sharp claws, he suddenly sensed something and looked up into the sky. When he saw Sillin, Hui Mao wanted to shout, "My savior!" He jumped down from Songba Leruo's hat and climbed up Sillin's leg before Sillin could stabilize the hoverboard. Then, he crouched on Sillin's shoulder and shot Bart a, "What can you do now, look?" Bart simply stroked his mustache and smiled faintly without saying a word. Sillin jumped down from the hoverboard and put it away. Then, he flicked Huemao's head and looked at Bart and Songba Leruo to greet them. "Lil Sillin, are you done over there?" Bart asked. "It's done. The rest will be taken over by the people inside the military." Bart nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Since Bart and Songba Leruo had been moving all this time, they had already reached the edge of Vanguard Zone. Any further and they would be entering Lon Hudi's zone. While Sillin and Bart were talking about this newly lit sector, Huimao suddenly let out a shout and pointed his claw in a certain direction. Sillin looked. "It's that kid called Ghost Butterfly something who owes us money." Chapter 205. Huimao had never had any direct contact with Guidai Shichi before. Danlong had once told Huimao about Lon Hudi, and under Huimao's strong request, he had even used a device to draw out Guidai Shichi's appearance. After serving under Sillin for so long, Huimao had developed a temperament that would get excited at the mention of money. He had a deep impression of the people who owed him money, so when he saw the person on the debt list, Huimao became excited. Because Huimao was too excited, his voice was a little loud, so much so that the people around him turned to look at him. Then, they looked in the direction Huimao's claw was pointing at. Guidai Shichi was originally chatting with his two companions about the few big-breasted girls they had met on their way here, but Huimao's loud shout attracted their attention. Then, Guidai Shichi's stomach ached when he saw the person he really didn't want to see. "Why is that bastard here?" Moreover, because of Huimao's words, everyone's gazes were focused on them. Guidai Shichi just wanted to find a hole to hide in. Bart looked at the constipated expression on Guidai Shichi's face and smiled in relief. Even Lon Hudi's people had times when they were humiliated like this. "Long time no see." Sillin raised his hand in greeting. The corner of Guidai Shichi's mouth twitched. Long time no see." The people around Guidai Shichi looked at Sillin and wondered what level this person belonged to in Vanguard. Judging by age, he was either a B Squadron member or an assistant in the A Squadron. But when they looked at the two people next to him, whether it was Bart or Songba Leruo, they were both veterans. Who wouldn't know them? The person standing next to the two of them was not unfamiliar with them either. He didn't lower his stance either, so there was more to think about. Huimao stood on Sillin's shoulder and stared at Guidai Shichi with round eyes, as if saying, "If you don't admit it, I'll go up and scratch you." "Hehe, so you guys are from Vanguard. I was looking for you guys for a long time, but I couldn't find you. Do you have any contact information?" Guidai Shichi took the initiative to walk over and said. It couldn't be helped. If he waited for Sillin to take the initiative to speak, would he, Guidai Shichi, still have any face left? Moreover, Guidai Shichi had personally experienced that brat's character. He was definitely trash. Sillin and Huimao weren't stupid enough to believe Guidai Shichi's bullshit. They just smiled at Guidai Shichi, making Guidai Shichi's hair stand on end. Bart patted Sillin's shoulder and said, "Hee, you guys go ahead and chat. Songba Leruo and I will go somewhere else to meet our old friends." After Bart and Songba Leruo left, Guidai Shichi was visibly more relaxed. After all, the two of them were from the older generation. It was a little awkward to speak in front of them. Moreover, Guidai Shichi was used to being casual in Lon Hudi, so he felt uncomfortable when he saw the older members of other hunter regiments. Brat, the normal stimulant elixirs and nutrition pills cost a total of 1 million, and that's not including the interest. Huimao said. Guidai Shichi glanced at Huimao. How did this pet know about his debt? Without thinking too much about it, Guidai Shichi put his hands in his trouser pockets and raised his chin. Why would Lon Hudi do something so immoral? Find a place to swipe my card, and I'll transfer the money to you. Sillin's communicator rang just as he was about to speak. The corner of Sillin's eyes twitched when he saw the contact code displayed on the communicator. 888888. Setting aside the question of which party the A represented, Sillin knew that it was that idiot just from the 6 8s behind the contact code. Sillin looked around and found a quiet place. As expected, Lung's face that had just woken up appeared on the communicator the moment the call connected. I was just about to look for you. But how did you know my contact code? Silin asked. Lung smiled proudly and scratched his hair that looked like a bird's nest. I got it from C.I. Jincheng. Hey, Wheeze, I have a new flavor of fish biscuits here. There are more than 10 flavors, including freshwater and saltwater fish flavors. Really? Hui Mao's dilated pupils showed his excitement. Lung lifted up a plate in his hands. The biscuits on the plate were specially made into the shape of fish. Different flavors had different fish shapes. Silin, let's go look for Lung. It's none of our business as long as they don't fight here. Hui Mao slapped Silin's face with his claws and said, You guys can come over now. I have a newly built clubhouse here, and I'm planning to hold a small gathering while everyone is free. We're all familiar with each other, and I've already told C.I. Jincheng and Knight about it. You should come as well. There are a few other familiar faces who will be coming later. Let's have a gathering. All right. Did CGU ask you to invite him? Flying Snake? He's here too? Of course I'm inviting him. Who else is there too? Who's that figure behind you? Do I know him? Lung asked when he saw the figure behind Silin through the communicator. Silin adjusted the angle of the communicator so that Lung could see Guidai Shichi more clearly. When he saw the face on the communicator, Guidai Shichi's mood turned sour again. This guy wasn't a good guy either. However, just as Guidai Shichi braced himself for Lung's next words that made his stomach ache just like the cat on Silin's shoulder, Lung took a close look at Guidai Shichi and said with certainty, I don't know him. Guidai Shichi. This sentence didn't just make his stomach ache, even his balls hurt. Guidai Shichi never knew that his presence was this insignificant. Hui Mao's beard shook. How can you not know him? He's the one who was beaten half to death, the one who owed you money and was saved by you guys later. You even told me what he looked like back then. Guidai Shichi wanted to kill someone when he heard Hui Mao's words. Fortunately, there weren't many people here, and their voices weren't loud, otherwise they would be laughed at for a long time if they were overheard. After looking again, Lung finally remembered that he didn't usually have a good memory for people who didn't trade money with him. So it's that perverted butterfly. Since we've bumped into each other, let's come over together. All right, I'm not going to talk to you guys anymore. I'm hungry, I'm going to look for food, see you later, beep. Before Silin could finish, the guy cut him off. Putting away the communicator, Silin looked at Guy Shichi. Let's go, we'll go to that rich guy. He has everything and we can even get some food. Guidai Shichi was quite unwilling to go. He really didn't dare compliment the characters of these two people. But a rich guy? Who is he? Guidai Shichi asked. Silin looked at Guidai Shichi in surprise. You don't know who he is? That guy's appearance rate in the media is quite high. Guidai Shichi was conflicted. He had been busy and didn't have time to pay attention to that, and after a simple check on Silin, he didn't check again. He was really busy at that time. Seeing Guidai Shichi's conflicted look, Silin said, his name is Andriera Lung. It turned out to be that poor family that only had money left. No matter what, he had to go get some food. Let's go. Guidai Shichi said angrily. Wait, I'll call someone else. Silin contacted CGU, but Pianhua kept an eye on CGU, so when CGU made a move, she followed. They arranged to meet at the border between Vanguard and Lon Hudi. After all, CGU and the others weren't part of the hunter group, so they couldn't enter any of the areas, so they could only meet at the border. When they arrived at the place that Lung mentioned, they all had the same lament. What a wastrel! The place where Lung and the Andriera family were located was surrounded by the more famous families and business groups in the League of Stars, so this area was the kind that blinded the eyes, but the Andriera family was especially eye-catching. The temporary entertainment area that Lung mentioned was comparable to a high-class hotel. There were servants waiting in front of the door, but other than these servants, there was also a familiar skinny figure walking out from inside, obviously coming for Silin. The person who came was Brzett. There were a few youngsters talking in the private room above, and Lung felt that it wasn't good for them to talk freely with Brzett around, so he kicked Brzett out and told him to wait for Silin at the door. Brzett brought Silin and the others to the floor where Lung and the others were. The little old man's every movement was still very gentlemanly, and he also had a very kind smile on his face, but Siju and Gudai Shichi were all tensed up. They could feel that this little old man was very strong, and not someone they could deal with. Even if Brzett didn't show any evil intentions, Siju and Gudai Shichi just couldn't let their guard down. This was a habit that had been cultivated for a long time. Suddenly coming to a new environment and seeing strangers who would let down their guard so easily. Brzett didn't mind, and was still as kind as if he was looking at a descendant of his own bloodline. Brzett brought Sillin and the others to a door and politely made an inviting gesture with his hand. The young master is inside. Sigh, it's better for an old man like me to not attend a gathering of youngsters. I'll only be despised if I do. Seriously, every generation of Andryara's successors had the same bad temper. Right now, he was already looking forward to the next direct descendant of Andryara, or Lung's descendant. It was much more interesting to be led by a little kid. Thank you. Sillin returned a salute. He was still rather respectful towards the little old man Brzett. When he pushed open the door, a few people were already seated around the prepared chairs inside. Most of them were familiar faces, but there were two he didn't know. Lung, Knight, Ci Jincheng, Pride, Teresa, and Yu Linglong, who was sitting in a special wheelchair. When he saw Sillin come in, Lung stood up and waved. Hurry up, Sillin, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Hey, Flying Snake, I didn't expect someone from Sector S to come as well. Please take a seat, everyone. It could be said that the people sitting here right now were all reputable figures of their generation. They were all people who held real power in their respective forces, so even if they usually carried an air of arrogance around them, they had to put it away for now. Pride had matured quite a bit after so many years. Although his eyes still carried a habitual air of arrogance, it was already a lot better than before. Originally, Pride was busy with other missions and couldn't come to Sector Z. But after Ji Feihong told him about Sillin's situation, and after he confirmed it with Knight, he set aside his mission and came here. Pride still gave that trademark snort, but there was no hint of contempt in it. Sillin didn't mind. After getting familiar with him, he knew that this kid was actually just this awkward. When he was embarrassed, when he didn't know what to say, he would just give "mph." Everyone knew it, but they didn't point it out. Yu Linglong returned a sweet smile to Sillin. She was still about the same as the little girl he remembered from back then. No one sat on the seat next to Yu Linglong, and no one dared to. Everyone knew who this seat belonged to. Siju and Gudai Shichi very perceptively snatched the two seats next to Yu Linglong. Pai Hu swept his gaze across the group once before sitting next to Siju. He didn't squeeze into the seat next to Yu Linglong, and just stared at them curiously. Sillin sat down next to Yu Linglong and looked at her feet. Her feet were wrapped in rehabilitation equipment that was obviously the same as Dias's after undergoing the differentiation therapy. What happened? Sillin asked. It was an accident. It broke. Yu Linglong answered in a low voice. Her tone was obviously filled with great grievance. Lung, Knight, and the rest immediately shuddered. Little Princess Yu, where's that overbearing aura you had 2 minutes ago? Sillin sighed on the inside. After learning of Yu Linglong's identity, he also understood that everything that happened around her was not simple. There was obviously a very complicated reason why her feet were broken. Since Yu Linglong didn't want to talk about it, he didn't ask anymore. How are you recovering now? It's all right. I can barely walk, but I can't run. It hurts a lot. She was still feeling wronged. Lung, Knight and the rest turned their heads sideways and looked at the ground, pretending to know nothing. Little Princess Yu, you're lying. I saw you kicking an apple falling from a tree to pieces just 2 days ago. Why didn't you say it hurt then? Teresa, who had been watching all this time, pursed her lips and smiled. She raised the wine glass in her hand and gestured, Long time no see, Sillin. Teresa looked about the same as before. Time had not affected the beauty of Seven Lights' famous beauty Sa, but Sillin knew that Teresa was no longer the Gallo Teresa of the past. Teresa Duance, Aflon Duance's eldest daughter. This was Teresa's true identity. Back then, Sillin had already discovered the genetic relationship between Teresa and Aflon. Long time no see, beauty Sa is still the same. But you've changed. You're not as handsome as before. Teresa teased. Hem. Under Yu Linglong's coercion, Lung snapped his fingers, and a big plate of fish biscuits was served. Wow. Hui Mao jumped onto the big plate and rolled around, smearing all the fish biscuits with his scent. How do you feel about this present? Lung picked up a fish biscuit and tossed it towards Hui Mao. Hui Mao caught it with his mouth, chewed twice and swallowed it. It tastes pretty good. I'm going to pack it up and bring it back later. Sure, I'll have someone deliver it to you. Wheeze moved the plate of fish biscuits to the side and ate happily on its own. It ignored Sillin and Wheeze completely. The group of people gathered together, and as the host, Lung gave everyone a formal introduction. He only introduced them by name and a few simple things. Today's dinner did not involve any secrets, and it was just a gathering of peers. Among the people Sillin did not recognize, there were two people who were similar to Alan Chev back in the day. However, according to Lung's introduction, the electronic publications behind them were much higher ranked than the Allen families. Both of them had more than 80 contribution points. Pennius was backed by a famous internet information magnate with more than 80 contribution points in the League of Stars. Back when Sillin was still at 7 Lights, he had once reported on the sector championships Limitless. He was somewhat related to Lung. Fenuzwa was also backed by a famous business-related media magnate with more than 80 contribution points in the League of Stars, Lux. Since he mainly reported on the business sector, he had a lot of contact with Lung. If the two media giants Limitless and Lux could reach their current level, then the children they taught wouldn't be bad. At the very least, they wouldn't be muddle-headed when it came to judging and handling people. Therefore, even though they were facing people like Sillin who weren't exactly famous in the upper circle, the two of them would not look down on them. Plus, Lung, Knight, C.I. Jincheng, Yu Linglong and many more people valued them. Why should they look down on them? If they didn't even have this little bit of foresight, then what the hell were they supposed to do? The two young masters of the media giants were also very interested in the trio who came with Sillin. Pianhua saw that everyone had stated their background, and after a moment of thought, he revealed his identity as Fire Phoenix's disciple. Flying Snake had no intention of hiding his identity either. Pennius and Fenuzwa were obviously more curious about Sector S. After all, the League of Stars' media had the least involvement other than Sector Z. Now that Sector Z was half open to the public, only Sector S was left. After that, the four of them had a very congenial conversation. Lung had said that today was just a small gathering. They would not talk about business, and only talk about entertainment. Without the interference of their elders, everyone was chatting happily. They talked and laughed at each other's embarrassing moments. At the very least, the atmosphere was pretty good. No one bothered to find out how many complicated things you had behind you, or how many shameful criminal records you had. In reality, everyone would probably find out who had a criminal record not long after this gathering. They might not be able to investigate detailed secrets with their abilities, but they definitely had the ability to gather some general information and rumors. After all, this was a large military area, so they didn't dare to play too wildly. They just ate, drank, and laughed to relax everyone. At the same time, they also felt at ease. This could be considered a group. After all, it was far too easy for a lone force to become cannon fodder in this chaotic situation. No matter how high you stood, there was always a chance that you would fall. Also, judging from the current situation, if you fell, you wouldn't be able to climb the mountain again. Everyone had eaten their fill during the meal, and the worries in their hearts had eased a little. They drank a little too much, so Lung sent people to send them back. Pianhua was having a great drinking contest with a group of men, and she had even knocked out the two young masters of the media giants. They had even started calling each other Bo and Bro. Sillin didn't know if Pennius and Fenuzwa had seen through Pianhua's disguise, but it sounded like they were calling each other Bro pretty smoothly. Pianhua herself was a little drunk. Luckily, they were the only ones who knew that Pianhua was a woman. If everyone else knew, then they would have lost a lot of face. CGU had already predicted Fire Phoenix's fury, so it was best to avoid Pianhua for the next few days. Yu Linglong sat on her wheelchair with her head slightly bowed. She did not ask anyone to pick her up, and instead said to Silin, "Send me off." Silin did not plan to ask Long to send someone off just now. Since he had decided to send Yu Linglong off, then he asked Lung to send Hui Mao back. This guy had to supervise the fish biscuits anyway. They didn't use a flying car. Yu Linglong's area wasn't too far from here, and she didn't want to take a flying car, so she asked Silin to push her around. Night had already fallen in this area, and at the same time, the temperature difference between day and night was relatively large. Unlike the terrain of the hunter group, the natural scenery here was much better. After walking a few steps, they could see a small stream. Silin could feel the vitality of the stream. Under the rocky ground, there were living creatures swimming back and forth in the stream. Not far away, there was a stone bridge that looked very ancient, but Yu Linglong suggested walking over it. The stream wasn't deep, not even reaching their knees, so they didn't have to worry about drowning. "Your foot is still in the treatment period, so you can't touch the stream," Silin said. "It's fine, the treatment device on my foot is waterproof." Saying that, Yu Linglong stood up and pressed a button on her wheelchair. The original wheelchair automatically folded up and floated 1 meter away from Yu Linglong. She was a little stiff from sitting for too long today, so she stood up and held onto Silin's arm as they slowly walked forward. The area of the rich was very particular. Although the security system here was very good, it still maintained the natural appearance to a large extent, and there were even some sounds of insects. The two didn't say anything, and when they reached the edge of the water, Silin stopped. He slowly knelt down and pulled Yu Linglong's skirt that was almost hanging to the ground up to her knees and tied a knot. This way, the skirt wouldn't touch the water, and it could also protect her knees. The night was relatively cold, and the stream was even colder. It was important to take good care of the joints of a recovering patient. Yu Linglong felt very hot on her face, and 2 patches of red faintly spread out. However, the twilight covered her blush very well, but her current mood could be seen from her bright and gentle smiling eyes. Yu Linglong lowered her head and looked at Silin's movements. Because of her identity, Yu Linglong had always looked down on others with a strong aura, displaying the unique pride of the little princess of the Yu family. However, from this angle, her mood and performance were completely different. "Are you cold?" Silin raised his head and asked after tying the knot on Yu Linglong's long skirt. Hearing Silin's question, Yu Linglong was slightly stunned, and then lightly shook her head. A slight smile appeared on her face, as though she was still an inexperienced little girl, and not the little princess of the Yu family that made Long and the others go crazy from time to time. Silin also rolled up his trousers, threw his shoes over the side of the stream, and slowly led Yu Linglong into the stream. Silin first walked in the stream, and then helped Yu Linglong into the water. The cool stream water cooled down the heat caused by the alcohol, and they could feel the fish in the stream pecking at their feet. However, the night on this planet was really cold. Silin tested the temperature, and it was only about 5 to 6 degrees Celsius. Even if Yu Linglong was wearing a waterproof treatment device, it would still have some effect. Silin let Yu Linglong help him walk about a meter into the stream, and when they were about 10 meters away from the other side, he stopped again. Silin bent down and said, "All right, now that you've tasted the freshness, come on up, I'll carry you. The stream is cold, and it won't be good for your recovery if you catch a cold." Yu Linglong replied obediently. If someone who was familiar with Yu Linglong saw the usually domineering Yu Linglong being so obedient, their eyes would definitely pop out of their sockets. Yu Linglong leaned on Silin's back, and her head rested on Silin's shoulder. Listening to their breathing and the chirping of the surrounding insects, she felt an inexplicable sense of peace. Silin carried Yu Linglong on his back and walked to the other side of the stream. Yu Linglong touched the string around Silin's neck and asked, "What are you wearing?" "A person," Silin replied. Yu Linglong's hand stopped moving, and she didn't ask anymore. There was no point in arguing about the living and the dead. Yu Linglong understood, so she didn't argue about it. However, she tightened her grip on Silin's neck. They quickly covered the distance of 10 meters. "All right, little princess, come down." Yu Linglong pouted and reluctantly got down. The folded wheelchair floated down and unfolded. Silin helped Yu Linglong sit on it, and used his sleeve to wipe the water off her legs. He loosened the knotted skirt to cover her legs and adjusted the thermal insulation on the wheelchair. Silin pushed the wheelchair towards the place Yu Linglong mentioned. When they approached the area, there was a group of people waiting there, but none of them came forward. Obviously, they knew little Princess Yu's temperament very well. Silin pushed the wheelchair all the way to that side and handed it to the person who took over. However, Yu Linglong turned the wheelchair around and looked at Silin quietly. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were obviously waiting for something. Silin sighed and said, "Give me your hand." Yu Linglong's eyes curved into two crescent moons, and she quickly extended her hand. Silin placed a large green pearl on Yu Linglong's hand. Under the twilight, it emitted a gentle green light, and it made people feel that it was full of vitality. Yu Linglong could feel the warmth emitted from the green pearl and the vitality transmitted to her palm. Even her breathing became much smoother. Of course, she knew that this thing was very precious. At least, with her status as the little princess of the Yu family, she had never seen such a special pearl until now. "This is for you, it's good for your body's recovery." "Thank you," Yu Linglong said, holding the green pearl in her hand happily. "I should be the one saying thank you." Silin didn't know what Yu Linglong saw in him, but during the days when Silin was in the 6th Division, Yu Linglong had helped him a lot, both openly and secretly. Some of which Silin didn't even know. Looking at Yu Linglong's childlike expression, Silin stretched out his hand and rubbed Yu Linglong's head like how he rubbed Tang Qiuqiu. The group of people behind Yu Linglong were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Their dog eyes were really blind. He actually rubbed the little princess's head. The worst thing was that the little princess actually had a shy expression. "Go back and rest early." "Okay." After saying goodbye, Silin walked back, but he didn't use his hoverboard to fly away. This area was currently forbidden for outsiders to fly in the air, and the moment he flew up, he would probably become a sieve for the guards and robots of the various families hidden in the dark. After walking until he couldn't see the people of the Yu family, Silin raised his head to look at the sky, and then gave a middle finger. Somewhere high up in the sky, a small round ball was floating there. On the other side of the small round ball was a room in Lung's leisure house. Lung, Knight, and C.I. Jincheng were huddled there staring at the screen. When they saw the big middle finger on the screen, the three colleagues shouted, "Fuck! How did this guy find out?" Lung was conflicted. "Perverted senses," Knight said. C.I. Jincheng didn't say anything. He was wondering where on earth the problem was. This surveillance device was floating high up in the sky where it was hard to see with the naked eye, and it was nighttime right now. How on earth did Silin discover it? Silin didn't know about the three fellows' conflict, but he knew that they wouldn't stay put the moment he pushed Yu Linglong out. Lung's side wasn't the only one monitoring him. However, the other parties weren't doing too well, and they were constantly being disrupted by unknown signals. It was Cheto's doing. Silin arrived at the border of several forces. It was the neutral zone and a lot of people were flying along it. Even though it was very late right now, there were still a lot of hoverboards, flying cars, and so on. Silin shot a glance in the direction of the little stream he passed by with Yu Linglong on his back. Then he activated his hoverboard, jumped onto it, and flew towards the vanguard's area. Some time after Silin's departure, the number of people in this area gradually decreased. There was only one person flying in the neutral zone every 10 or so minutes. After a flying car whizzed past, everything became quiet again. The only sound one could hear was the chirping of insects. Meanwhile, a human figure gradually rose from the surface of the little stream. Silin and Yu Linglong passed by. Its face couldn't be seen clearly, and it looked like it was made entirely out of water. The figure stopped rising after its torso was exposed. The water person looked at the neutral zone and said, "Did that little guy discover me?" "I think so." The voice that answered the water person came from the forest not far away, but there was no one in sight. A gust of wind blew past, and a leaf drifted down. However, it was blocked by an invisible object on its way down, and it made a turn before landing somewhere else. "Forget it, who cares? Our target can't be him anyway," the water person said. "Why can't it be him? Don't underestimate that brat." On the contrary, that brat has the item. Really? That brat doesn't seem to be very powerful. He's still a little lacking in power, but he was able to discover your existence, so he must have hidden himself quite well. Let's not touch him for now and observe the situation first. All right. The water person dove back into the water, and everything returned to normal. The flying cars that occasionally passed by the neutral zone had no idea that there were two people here. By the time Sillin returned to the Vanguard's territory, it was already quite late. Apart from the people on shift duty, most of the others were already resting, so Sillin walked into his room without alerting anyone. As soon as he entered the room, he was greeted by the smell of fish. There was a big box full of fish biscuits in the room. Judging from the situation, Huemao's storage cabinet couldn't fit all the fish biscuits in there. Among the fish biscuits, there was a cat with the tip of its ears sticking out. It moved a little when Sillin walked in, but nothing else happened after that. Sillin shook his head and let the cat go for now. Standing at the corner, Cheto opened his eyes and closed them again when he saw that Sillin had no intention of talking to him. After washing up, Sillin lay down on the bed and thought about what happened today. The gathering at Sloane's place was a small matter. The first thing that puzzled him was Yu Linglong's injuries. When he was carrying Yu Linglong on his back, he clearly noticed that there was something wrong with her breathing system and heartbeat. Yu Linglong's emotions were part of the reason, but the main reason was that her internal organs had been seriously injured. Her breathing looked normal at first glance, but Yu Linglong's internal organs were seriously damaged. Who could have hurt her like that when she was under the protection of so many people in the Yu family? Her internal organs were seriously damaged, and her legs were broken. It wasn't hard to imagine that Yu Linglong had a brush with death. Sillin could see that Yu Linglong's injury was related to the Yu family, but the second thing that puzzled Sillin wasn't as simple as it seemed. When Sillin walked into the stream, he sensed something unusual in the water, but he didn't sense any danger. Moreover, there were a lot of Yu family guards hiding in the dark at the time, and they would have come out at the first sign of trouble. That was why Sillin pretended not to notice anything and walked across the stream with Yu Linglong on his back. But when he came back, he noticed an unusual presence in the forest even though he was walking on the stone bridge. The other party hid themselves very well, and Sillin wouldn't have noticed them if he hadn't met them before. The man who once appeared in the prison, Azrael's men, had arrived here without anyone knowing. So, what was their purpose this time? At the very least, Sillin hadn't sensed any large-scale strange phenomenon until now. But did the military know about the arrival of Azrael? No matter what, Sillin had to be vigilant. Azrael's men were all crazy, and no one knew what they were thinking. Early the next morning, Carrie and the others who knew that Sillin would return late came to look for Sillin, and wanted this vice-captain to tell them about his romantic encounter. To reach Sillin's room, they had to pass through a hall in the middle of this floor, but Carrie swallowed his clamor the moment he arrived at the hall. Senior Nada. Nada sat on the sofa in the hall, reading a paper book in his hand, and beside him was a box. Towards Carrie and the others' clamor, he just smiled and said, "You're in good spirits." Carrie, Xiaoshang, and the others scratched their heads with a smile, not knowing how to react. Nada was definitely here to look for Sillin. Carrie and the others stood there awkwardly for a while before leaving. Facing such a senior, it was really nerve-wracking. Not everyone could be as calm as Sillin. When Sillin woke up, Nada had already flipped more than 10 pages of the book. "I'm really sorry, Senior Nada. Why didn't you ask them to wake me up?" "It's okay, you're tired too." Sillin walked over and took out a bottle of water and some jerky from the storage cabinet. When he passed it to Nada, Nada waved his hand. "You can eat, I've already eaten." Sillin didn't hesitate and started eating in front of Nada. "What brings you here?" Sillin asked while chewing on the jerky. The rule of not talking when eating or sleeping didn't apply to hunters. Hunters didn't have time to follow those time-wasting etiquette. Nada closed the book and pushed the box in front of Sillin. "These are some parasite samples collected by some of my friends over the years. You can take a look if you're interested." Sillin clapped his hands, wiped his fingers clean and carefully opened the box. There were some sealed samples in the box. The bigger parasites only had some images and the samples were only a part of their body. As for the smaller parasites, there were whole ones and half of them. They had different shapes, some were ferocious, some were normal. There are some related records of these parasites in the video. It's definitely not as good as the professional records. It's just a rough record. Just make do with it. Sillin closed the box and smiled. This is enough. They're very precious samples. Nada nodded. Some of them are very special. There are also some that I couldn't get samples of, only some images. I took a look and there are a few that are really rare. If I have the chance, I might as well catch one. Sillin didn't look at the images. After finishing his breakfast, he brought the box to his room and put it away. Do you have any plans for the morning? If you don't have any plans, accompany this old man for a walk. Nada said. I don't have any plans. Please wait a moment. Sillin changed his clothes and brought some essentials with him. Then he walked out with Nada. I heard that you went to Andryra's boy yesterday? And Lon Hudy's men? Sillin didn't deny it. Many people knew about this. It's a good thing. Whether it's Andryra's, Lon Hudy's, or the people of Sector S, it's a good thing to get to know them. I know that you have a wide network of contacts, and these are all good for your future development. It may not be beneficial to use the old standards, but given the current situation, I believe you can analyze it even if you don't know much. Right now, it's not as stable as it used to be. Although Sillin didn't agree with some of Nada's views, Nada was teaching him sincerely. Sillin just listened attentively. Nada continued, Yesterday, a few old fellows in the A Squadron had a small meeting. Although the leaders' meeting hadn't started yet, everyone had analyzed some things according to the information we received. Other than the military's absolute control of Sector Z, the rest of the places will be divided. The military doesn't have a stomach big enough to swallow up this big sector in one go. Hunter groups and the like will have at least 10 years of occupation rights. As for the development and collection of resources on each planet, whether or not they can take over the areas they have been allocated will depend on their own abilities. Will there be a lot of competition? Sillin asked. Competition, that's for sure. I'm guessing that the leaders will draw randomly when the time comes, and those who get more resources will naturally be eyed by those with less resources. Therefore, your B Squadron's free missions will be cancelled. When the time comes, you'll have to stay in your assigned area for a longer period of time and deal with the traps in the dark. You must be prepared for all of this. I know. This was the benefit of being a big force. Once there was a cake, the big forces in the League of Stars would divide it up cleanly. The small forces couldn't even eat the dregs. While Nada was explaining some things to pay attention to, his intention was to let Sillin be mentally prepared. He didn't tell these things directly to Shoten, but to Sillin instead. It was obvious how much Nada valued Sillin. In Nada's eyes, Sillin was far more important than Shoten. Both his strength and connections satisfied Nada very much. As the duo walked, they approached the neutral zone. There was a flying car waiting for Nada. Never mind, we'll stop here. I still have some matters to attend to. You go do your own thing. After watching Nada enter the flying car and leave, Sillin also turned around and prepared to go back. It was at this moment a few people on hoverboards flew over and laughed loudly. Hearing the laughter, Sillin turned around abruptly. There were only a few backs left in the air. They looked very ordinary, just like the young people he saw when he first came to this area. The laughter of the people on the hoverboards disappeared in an instant, but it triggered a memory buried deep in Sillin's mind. It was one of the two voices that had been troubling him all this time. Fog, or Wuxia? Chapter 206. It was the two voices that Sillin had memorized deeply after the hypnosis effect was broken. One of the voices had hypnotized Sillin. Although he didn't know which side, Mist, or Wuxia, belonged to, it seemed that the person who had hypnotized Sillin wasn't this person. Sillin could tell that the voice hadn't interfered with his consciousness, which meant that the person who had hypnotized him was someone else. Be it Mist, or Wuxia, they were flying around the neutral zone openly on hoverboards without anyone noticing them. It was truly dangerous. After all, they were two top assassin organizations. This was the military's territory, and all the satellite surveillance was in the military's hands. Right now, Sillin didn't dare let Cheto invade this place. There were too many experts here, and both he and Cheto would be done for if they were caught. After cleaning up his thoughts, Sillin flew back to the base. There were some things he needed to explain as soon as possible. Just like Nada said, a portion of people had arrived as the day of the leaders' summit drew closer and closer. Carrie and the others were the first batch of Vanguard's follow-up forces, and the second batch would come to replace the first batch. However, every B squadron would send a portion of their people instead of all of them. Then, they would take shifts so that everyone could see the planet and familiarize themselves with the environment and terrain. After Carrie and Xiao Shang's shift, the 7th B squadron took over. Carrie and the others had to return to the small planet in the satellite belt. Unlike Sillin and the A squadron, they couldn't stay here forever. However, Cheto didn't leave. He stayed inside Sillin's room and kept an eye on things without anyone noticing. Before Carrie and the others left, Sillin had a talk with them and told them to train as soon as possible. "Lieutenant, is there work to do?" Carrie rubbed his palms together. "It's always good to be prepared." Sillin didn't say it out loud, but it was enough. "All right, don't worry, I'll pass on the lieutenant's message. Even that white fatty will be watching closely. Tell the others to pay more attention." In reality, Sillin knew that the situation was even more complicated and serious than Nada had made it out to be. It would be fine if it was just a fight for resources, but what if it was about Alilo? 50 years ago, it was just one incident that involved several parties. Now they were all gathered here. Once Alilo's senses discovered them, even if they didn't start fighting now, the war that would erupt after they left this planet was not something that could be compared to 50 years ago. After Sillin and the others had left, Sillin couldn't help but feel a little irritated. He didn't know if it was because of the voice he heard earlier or something else, but he just couldn't calm down. He was planning to study the parasite samples Nada had given him, but he wasn't in a good state right now. He didn't have the mood to study the samples at all and just stared blankly at them. In the end, Sillin went around on his hoverboard alone. At the meeting area the military had circled out, there were small automated service points built at intervals. These places provided food, some basic necessities, and some small entertainment. Some young people from different forces would drag old friends they hadn't seen for many years to these places. Therefore, there were a lot of people at every service point. Sillin bought a glass of fruit juice from a small beverage shop. He didn't order alcohol. His mind was already muddled and irritated to begin with, and drinking would only make him even more muddled. Right now, he needed to calm down and think about things. The surroundings were very noisy, but there were still some empty seats around this beverage shop. They were all open air. Sillin sat down in front of a small table for two and drank fruit juice under an umbrella that blocked out the light. He watched the people coming and going. The young people were in groups of 3 to 5, with the symbols of different forces. They were jostling and joking. Sillin also saw a 13 or 14-year-old girl with a butterfly tattoo on her arm. Different from Guidai Shichi's ghost butterfly tattoo, the butterfly tattoo on her arm was a swallowtail butterfly, and the pattern on the swallowtail butterfly's wings was like that of a tiger. Sillin heard her companions call her Tiger Phoenix. Lan Hudi's swallowtail butterfly was her subordinate. Ching Feng handed the juice to Tiger Phoenix. Noticing Sillin's gaze, she looked back at him, then withdrew her gaze and left with Tiger Phoenix. After Lan Hudi's two subordinates left, Sillin looked around again. The cold temperature of the juice didn't calm Sillin down. It was not because of the noise around, but because he had a feeling that something was going to happen. Sillin's fingers were tapping on the juice glass unconsciously. Suddenly, his movement stopped, and all the hair on his body almost stood out. Sillin saw a person who looked very ordinary, and his appearance and clothes were not eye-catching. However, it was this person who made Sillin feel that he was surrounded by icicles, and if he moved a little bit, he would be pierced into pieces. Yes, this was the reason for his irritation. After the shock, the irritation in Sillin's heart subsided. That person just walked over step by step. There was nothing special about him. His steps were not big, and he was neither fast nor slow. Through that pair of pupils, Scylla couldn't see the hidden emotions in them at all. At first glance, he seemed to be smiling casually, but when he looked carefully, he found that he couldn't see anything. Scylla knew too well what such eyes meant. It was either a killer or a person who was so cold that he was almost cruel and numb. The others who weren't stared at by that person didn't have any abnormal reactions. They were still drinking and chatting, and they didn't know that there was such a killer approaching step by step. Only when they met that person's eyes would they understand the uniqueness and horror of this person. Now, Scylla felt like he was in a world of ice and snow. His whole body was cold, and he stood there motionlessly. His whole body was tense, and he was ready to fight at any time. Although Scylla knew that his death rate in this fight was more than 70%, he had no way out when facing this person. Scylla was even careful with every breath, and he always kept his state at the peak. However, under the gaze of this person, Scylla was quite clear about the disparity in strength between the two sides. There were weapons hidden in Scylla's leaf-patterned ring, including guns and cannons. However, against such a person, he would be killed before he could take out the weapons. Therefore, Scylla still put more attention on this person, and at the same time, his mind quickly turned to think of a way out. The strange thing was that when the person walked 5 meters in front of Scylla, he suddenly stopped. The look in his eyes seemed to be a little surprised, and then he smiled at Scylla. That smile made Scylla feel even colder, but the good thing was that the person's line of sight turned away and walked in another direction. It wasn't until the figure was submerged in the crowd for a long time that Scylla slowly let his tense muscles relax, and his back was full of cold sweat. The mouthful of juice was really cold. "Do you know who he is?" The sudden voice shocked Scylla. After he reacted, he looked behind him. He really didn't feel anyone behind him, but perhaps it was because of this person behind that the person didn't make a move? Just now, Scylla was sure that the person's target was him, and he only changed his mind later. "Hunting knife Gaydar? You're also invited to the summit?" Scylla asked. The person standing behind Scylla was indeed Hunting Knife Gaydar, and he still looked like a harmless academic. Gaydar sat opposite Scylla with a glass of juice and smiled. "Yeah, but I'm not like you Vanguard people. I'm a lone ranger after all, and the only reason they invited me here was to sign a treaty and set their minds at ease. I don't have the right to divide the area or anything, but I will get a sum of contract money." After thinking for a moment, Scylla understood the meaning behind it. After he thought it through, the problem returned to its original track. Who was that person just now? That person? Gaydar swirled the juice in his glass. "Back then, he beat me half to death, and it took me more than a dozen years to recover." Scylla nearly spat out the juice in his mouth. It turned out that Gaydar was squatting in Sector S's prison after he was injured, but it was a good place to recuperate. At the very least, it was well hidden. However, someone who could injure Hunting Knife Gaydar. Scylla's eyes widened, and his fingers made a 6, and then a 1. Yes, he is one of the 6 stars lone hunters. As expected of that level. Among the 6 stars of hunt, other than the 4 from the Big 4, you know of 2 lone hunters, right? Scylla nodded, but I don't know who they are. It was true that with Scylla's current identity and level, he could not meet the people who stood at the top yet. But what was up with that person just now? Scylla did not think that he had offended him. One of the 2 lone hunters is all right. She is the only female among the 6 stars of hunt, Exen Prisa. She has a lazy personality and does things according to her own preferences, but at least she's not bloodthirsty. Strictly speaking, she's not a lone hunter. Scylla raised an eyebrow. He really did not expect there to be a woman among the 6 stars of hunt. As for the other person, that's the one you met just now. Osculo, that guy kills as easily as he eats. He is known as the loneliest and most vicious lone hunter. The people he knows have all killed their way to the top, and he only recognizes them if they can survive his attacks. As for the people he has decided to kill, other than a few star hunters and a few from the Heavenly Edict Empire, no one is still alive. Then it was just a spur of the moment. He hasn't made up his mind to kill you yet. However, Gaydar looked at Scylla. "I'm not trying to discourage you, but based on what I know about Osculo, he definitely has his eyes on you." Silin caught the other meaning in Gaydar's words. Just eyes on me? He doesn't want to kill me? That depends on what he has on you that is worth his attention. He is a person who will not make a move without direct benefits. Of course, that doesn't rule out the possibility that he might kill on a whim for fun. Olillo's star map fragment. However, he didn't feel the attraction from Olillo's star map just now. Gaydar could tell what Silin was thinking. He said, "There's no need to doubt it. It's exactly what you're thinking. Some people have the means to hide the attraction and resonance." Silin frowned. In other words, the people who were targeted were those who did not have the ability to hide the attraction and resonance, and he was one of them. "Do you want to know how to hide them?" Gaydar asked with a faint smile. Silin looked at Gaydar. This lone traveler's smile was sly no matter how he looked at it. "Senior, if you have any requests, just tell me. I like to talk to smart people." Gaydar finished the juice in the glass, but he still held the empty glass in his hand and played with it. "I can tell you how to hide it, and I can also give you a piece of Olillo's star map fragment. Of course, this fragment is not the type you want, but it is the type that the Andryra family needs." Silin lowered his eyes and did not say anything, quietly waiting for Gaydar to continue. Seeing that Silin did not respond, Gaydar continued, "The conditions are actually not much. When the time comes, after you collect the Olillo star map and activate Olillo, I want to accompany you. Of course, I promise I won't delay your matters, and I might even be able to help you. Senior Gaydar, let's not talk about whether I can get it or not. How do you know what kind of fragment I have? Out of the 5 Olillos, only 2 are known. Excluding the one from the Andryra family, I don't know what the remaining 2 are." I know what kind of fragment you have, and the people looking for it are not people you can resist. Azrael and Osculo are both waiting for the one you have." Silin was shocked. There was actually an Azrael. However, from what Gaydar said, he did not know that he actually had 2 pieces. "What's this in my hand?" Celine asked. In the myth of creation, the one that represents new life is called a shortcut. Shortcut? I once heard a guy from Azrael say that the shortcut might be a space jump point, a jump point to a jump point outside of the star system where the League of Stars is located. This news undoubtedly shocked Silin. Due to the abnormal environment around the star system where the League of Stars was located, the League of Stars Research Institute had tried some space technology, but to no avail. That was why no one from outside the star system had ever entered the star system of the League of Stars, and no one from the League of Stars had ever gone out. Even the people from the Big Four could only go out a little around the star system, but could not completely escape. If this news were to be known by the military, even Knight and Mo Hung would not be able to protect Silin. But was he going to hand it over to the people from Vanguard now? I advise you to keep it for yourself. Vanguard isn't as united as a piece of iron. Unless Ji Feng personally promises it, don't take it out easily. If Silin agreed with Gaydar, then the best time was to wait for him to join the A-Team. But before he joined the A-Team, then how can I guarantee that I won't be killed by Azrael and Osculo, the Star Hunter? Don't worry about the people from Azrael. Their main goal right now isn't to get the shard, but to find it. The most important thing for you right now is to escape Osculo's knife. Easy for you to say. How am I supposed to escape? Run to Jifeng's place? If you run to Jifeng's place now, it'll undoubtedly be a direct confrontation between Jifeng and Osculo. With the current situation, more than half of the people in Vanguard will die. Silin fell silent. Don't worry. I've already divined for you. There will be ups and downs, but you won't die in the end. Silin was so angry that he laughed. I didn't know that Senior Gaydar believed in this. Gaydar simply said, some things have to be believed. Some things have to be believed. Silin thinks of Tico's rabbit. Alright, I'll tell you the method now. As for the people from Azrael, I'll go talk to them. They won't touch you for now. Gaydar and Silin sat there and chatted, but no one around them could hear what Gaydar and Silin were saying. Even if there was a listening device next to them, it wouldn't be able to pick up any sound. An hour later, Silin rode his hoverboard back to the Vanguard area in exhaustion. The The moment he got back, he fell asleep. Gadar's method used up too much spiritual power. Practicing alone took up more than half of it. But even though it was very taxing, Sillin could still afford it once he got used to it. No wonder those who could get the shard without being found out were all strong. Ordinary people with rank A genes would definitely not be able to afford such an amount of mental power consumption. Hey, Sillin, what's wrong? Hui Mao jumped onto Sillin from the cat's nest of fish biscuits. Get down already, you smell like fish. Hui Mao stomped on Sillin a few times like he was venting his anger before jumping back into his nest. As expected, sleeping in a nest of fish biscuits was the best. Sillin lay on his bed and looked at Hui Mao, who had crawled back into the fish biscuits. He began to think of a countermeasure. It was obvious that Hui Mao would be a good helper against Osculos, but whether or not he could be of any help was another question altogether. Just as Gadar said, Azrael's men didn't come looking for Sillin, and the leaders' summit had begun. The summit ended after 5 whole days of meetings. No one except the participants knew exactly how many people had participated in the summit, or what the process was like. However, the division of Sector Z had been made public. There was no telling if there were some internal rules, but Jifeng's division just so happened to include the planet where they mined the special energy ores. All in all, Jifeng's division was pretty good. Of course, there were people who were satisfied, and there were people who were dissatisfied. The military didn't care what would happen to those who were dissatisfied. It was a matter of personal luck, and they had to accept it even if they were dissatisfied. If you want to fight, then go ahead. As long as you don't break the bottom line. Sillin left the big planet with the crowd and returned to a small planet in the satellite belt. After packing up a bit, they departed for their assigned division. The A Squadron starships were at the vanguard, and the B squadrons were at the rear. It was an impressive formation that was far more domineering than the 6th Division's solo operation. This was the true strength of the Big Four. At the same time, on an inconspicuous starship, Gadar was talking to the person opposite him. Can that kid really succeed? The person sitting opposite Gadar asked. Let's wait and see. Chapter 207. Inside the 6th B Squadron starship, Sillin stared at the string of characters displayed on the communicator in his hand. The characters were decoded to form a message, and it was from Hunting Blade Gada. Gadar was mainly trying to reassure Sillin that Azrael wouldn't come looking for Sillin just yet. Moreover, Osculos was being harassed by some military people as of late. He was a famous star-class Lone Ranger in the League of Stars, and anyone who knew Osculos would keep a close eye on him. Therefore, Sillin was safe for the time being, and Sillin had a buffer period. Sillin had always been curious about Hunting Knife Gadar. A Lone Ranger like him was second only to Osculos, and although Gadar claimed that he was injured by Osculos and was forced to recuperate in a prison at Sector S, Sillin thought that half of it was true and half false. Sillin believed that Osculos had injured him, but the fact that he was forced to recuperate at Sector S was a different story. The fact that Gadar survived Osculos' attack proved how strong he was. But at the same time, Sillin also thought about something else. Osculos was able to injure Gadar back then, but what about now? Gadar gave Sillin a very strange feeling. Sillin couldn't understand the man at all. Moreover, considering Osculos' temper, why did he change his mind at the last minute when he had set his sights on Sillin? It was all because of Gadar. Just how strong had Gadar become after all these years? The fact that Gadar was able to speak to Azrael alone was already an astounding level of influence. There was also his divination. Whether or not Gadar was telling the truth, Gadar was shrouded in a layer of fog. What? We're here. Carrie's shout pulled Sillin back to reality. Everyone was very excited when they saw the image on the big screen. According to the star map, this was the area the Vanguard was assigned to. Zone ZJ, Sector Z, District J. In the next 10 years, this area would belong to Vanguard for mining resources. Next, the team did a detailed analysis of the general situation of this area and listed out the situation of each planet to facilitate their subsequent actions. After 10 days of rough collection, the A-team confirmed a relatively large planet with a level A habitability. They named it Planet ZJ-100. Once ZJ-100 was confirmed, unless there was a special reason, this planet would always be the core planet of Sector J. Whether it was now or in the future, it would be returned to the military. After the central planet was confirmed, the 10B squadrons did not stop their exploration. With Planet ZJ-100 at the center of the division as the core, they spread out in 10 directions. The 10B squadrons would surround the central planet of ZJ-100 where the A squadrons were located and occupy a planet as a temporary stronghold. Then, they would develop the planet on their own. Finding a suitable planet as a temporary stronghold for the B squadrons wasn't as easy as it sounded. It would be great if they could find a Level A habitability planet, but if they couldn't, then they could only look for a Level B habitability planet. However, Level A habitability planets were extremely rare in Sector Z's universe to begin with, and the best one they could find was already a core planet. The communication network of Sector ZJ had already spread out. Coupled with the easing of the universe's environment, the communication between the B squadrons was pretty frequent. They all knew which B squadrons had found a suitable planet, and which B squadrons were still stuck at a standstill. As the exploration work continued, they kept hearing that some B squadrons had found a suitable planet. 2 of them were even lucky enough to find a Level A habitability planet. Although the 2 planets weren't big, it was enough to make the other B squadrons envious. Recently, everyone in the 6th Division had begun to grow impatient. This was because the 6th Division had yet to confirm a temporary stronghold planet. They hadn't found a Level A habitability planet, and they had only found 3 Level B habitability planets. These 3 planets were small in size, and their environments alone were enough to remove them from the candidate list. They weren't suitable to build a temporary stronghold on. As for Level C habitability planets, that was even less of a problem. Of course, there were more Level C planets, but who would build a temporary stronghold on a Level C habitability planet? If this was in the past, the squad members would have rushed over to inspect a Level C habitability planet like they were on steroids. But now, they weren't in the mood to look at Level C planets. The most important thing right now was to find a temporary stronghold. As for the other inspections and whatnot, they would only have the time and energy to do them after the temporary stronghold was built. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have a place to stay, and the squads who had already started building their stronghold were smiling at them. Who would have the mood to inspect a planet? On the main starship, Schotten and the technical crew were busy looking at the results sent back by the probes. The planets around them were either Level C or Level D. At the same time, these results would be shared with the squads after being processed by the technical crew so that everyone could understand the situation. Carey leaned against the back of his chair with a bitter expression as he looked at the results sent over by Schotten's main starship. He said dispiritedly, "Say, don't you think we're a little too unlucky? Otherwise, how could we have found those 2 underdeveloped Level B planets by now?" Yudi glared at him and said, "It's already good enough that they're developing like that in this kind of environment." Carey snorted, "Are we really going to go back to those underdeveloped planets and build a stronghold in the end?" "No way, that's so embarrassing." Beaver looked at the summary of the information he had gathered over the past few days and said helplessly, "There's nothing we can do. Not every B squadron is so lucky." Carey turned his head and looked at the white fatty who was rolling around with the Miantuan at the corner of the wall. "Shueishio, come over here and give Big Brother a pinch. It'll help vent some of my anger." Shueishio heard Carey's words and immediately rolled out of the room. No matter how much Carey yelled at him, he pretended not to hear him. "Fuck, this white fatty is becoming more and more unlikable." "Carey, it's not that Shueishio is unlikable, it's that your period is coming," Yudi said while stroking the Miantuan's tail that had jumped onto his knee. "You're the one who's on your period." Beaver heard the conversation between Carey and Yudi and shook his head. "Never mind, let them bicker all they want." He looked at the analysis data again and glanced at the scene outside on the big screen. They were about to pass by a C-grade planet. The surface area of the planet was not bad, but according to the data from the probes, it was not suitable for landing. How good could a planet with a C-grade habitability be? Many people thought the same as Beaver, so the 6th Division's starship had no intention of stopping. However, as they got closer and closer to the C-grade planet, Huimao, who was sleeping on Silin's shoulder, suddenly opened his eyes and his ears perked up. "What's wrong?" Silin asked when he saw Huimao's reaction. "Something's wrong. That planet. Something's wrong." Huimao stared at the image displayed on the big screen. His gaze landed on the planet that had been identified as C-grade habitability. "What's wrong?" Huimao did not speak, but Silin saw Huimao's pupils dilate and contract into the shape of swords. Something that could interest Huimao so much, Silin immediately connected to Shotten's communicator. "Commander, please stop the starship for a moment. Something's come up." "What is it?" Shotten asked. Right now Shotten was not in a good mood either. After all, the 6th B Squadron had not made any progress until now, and Shotten was the one who drew lots to decide the sailing direction and route of each B Squadron. Now that they had not encountered any good planets along the way, the members were all starting to complain in their hearts. Therefore, the pressure on Shotten was considerable. "I've discovered something. I want to take a look at the planet that has been appraised as a rank C habitability planet." Celine told him her thoughts directly. Shotten frowned and fell silent for a moment. Then he said, "Sure. How much support do you need?" "No need. Whis, Cheto, and I are enough. I'll give you 3 hours. If you find nothing, come back immediately." "All right." Some of the technicians complained after Shotten ordered the starship to stop, but Shotten didn't say anything. Since they had chosen to trust Silin, they had to endure the pressure. Carrie wanted to go with Silin, but Silin turned him down. Instead, he piloted a small spaceplane and flew over with Huimao and Cheto. The air on this planet was very thin, so the cosmic rays were very strong and the air itself was harmful to human breathing. That was why Silin walked out of the spaceplane wearing a protective suit. Huimao was the one who pointed out the landing spot. Huimao and Cheto were very comfortable. After walking out of the spaceplane, Huimao kept running in a certain direction. Cheto didn't notice anything unusual on the starship, but his eyes flashed after he stepped out of the spaceplane. It was obvious that he was doing a deep scan of the area. This place looked like a plain, but there were some small hills here and there. There weren't any tall mountains at all. Huimao looked very excited. It wasn't because he was excited about food, but because he had found something fun. Normal scanning devices were useless in this place, and Silin's biomonitor didn't show anything at all. Not even their vitals showed anything. It was obvious that there was something wrong with this place. Fortunately, Cheto was still functioning normally. He was able to transmit some images to the starship through him. Although the images were a little disjointed, they were still visible enough for the people on the starship to see what was going on. Silin's running footsteps came to a halt as he looked around. He could feel a lot of eyes watching them from the shadows. "There are high-level alien life forms nearby," Cheto said. "There are, but we don't know what they are." Silin looked around once before continuing forward with Huimao. On the starship, Shotten and the technicians couldn't believe what Silin and Cheto were saying. According to the data detected by the probes, there weren't any high-level life forms on this planet. There were microbes, but most of them lived in extreme environments. There were also some low-level single-celled organisms, and plants were more like low-level life forms. Huimao clearly didn't care about the gazes. Instead, he lowered his head and sniffed here and there. He looked very happy. "There's something down here. It's an electronic device. It's huge." Huimao turned around and said to Silin excitedly. "How big is it?" Silin asked. "The place we landed, the places we passed, and the places we're stepping on right now extend all the way to the distance. It's about 1/5 of the planet's surface." Silin narrowed his eyes. Although he had sensed something unusual after he arrived on this planet, his senses weren't as sensitive as Huimao's. He didn't know what it was, and he couldn't estimate the range of the sensation. Still, he was surprised to hear Huimao's words. Right now, he had a vague feeling that someone had come to this planet a long time ago, and they had made a huge commotion and left some things behind. Shotten had heard Huimao's words too. The news was shocking, but he didn't doubt Huimao's judgment. In other words, There was something on this planet that was interfering with the probes. If that was the case, the data they detected would be rendered useless. Sillin, don't move yet. I'll send someone to... Before Shotten could finish, a few black shadows appeared on the screen. Sillin stared at the figures walking out from behind the protruding hills and took out his gun. Well, what is that? A technician gulped and asked. Since it was night time on the other side, they couldn't see what exactly it was from the image Cheto sent back. They could only see a rough outline. It was about 2 meters tall, and it looked like a standing scorpion. In short, it was definitely not a human. Send a squad to the rescue immediately. The hair on Shotten's back was standing on end. This planet was really strange. Right now, he was regretting sending Sillin out. The creatures gradually increased in number and surrounded Sillin's group. They formed an encirclement and gradually shrunk. With the help of the dim starlight, Sillin was able to see the appearance of these monsters clearly. Their mouths were triangular in shape, and they had several pairs of fangs. There were 3 pairs of pincers on their abdomens, and 3 pairs of feet with sharp claws were nailed to the ground. There was even a curled tail behind them. The surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a lot since the appearance of these creatures. Hui Mao still didn't look at the creatures. Instead, he kept walking in circles, thinking about something. Wheeze, there's an enemy. What do we do? Sillin asked in a low voice. These creatures were definitely not easy to deal with, and there were so many of them. The space plane was still some distance away, and the situation was very bad for Sillin. Moreover, he was the only human here, so he was the target of everyone. Sillin was going crazy at Hui Mao's calmness. In response to Sillin's low roar, Hui Mao only flicked his ears and stopped spinning. Strings of green characters quickly flashed across his eyes. Sillin and Cheto stood back to back, ready to deal with the creatures that were approaching them step by step. Ya! A sharp roar broke the silence. This was the sound of a monster walking at the very front. It should be their leader. After the sharp roar, the creatures finally sped up and charged towards Sillin. His shoulder cannon, wrist blade, and combination laser gun were all ready. But just as Sillin was about to fight, the monsters suddenly stopped in their tracks and let out a low growl with unknown meaning. Yeah, it was another roar, but from the tone, it was clearly different from the previous one. After the roar, the creatures that were already 7 or 8 meters away from Sillin's group slowly retreated, and the reinforcements Shotten had sent gradually appeared in the sky. Reinforcements, don't come over yet. Don't open fire. Sillin said hurriedly. Just now, Hui Mao had sent him a message. The things underground were coming out. After receiving Sillin's order, the fighters and space planes that were flying above Sillin's group didn't land immediately. They were already here anyway, and they would open fire at the slightest movement. Lieutenant, what's going on? Before Carey could finish his sentence, he was stunned by the commotion below him. Everyone's reaction was about the same. Boom, boom, boom. The ground started shaking. The creatures swiftly left the area and vanished without a trace in no time at all. It was just like how they had arrived earlier. Sillin and Cheto didn't move. Hui Mao had told them that there was no danger here. As the ground shook, the rocks and dust on the surface of the protruding hills were shaken off. Then they lit up at the same time. For a time, the darkness of the night was brightly illuminated. The people on the starship were also stunned by the scene. The light was especially eye-catching in the darkness after passing through the thin atmosphere. Even without Cheto's image, the people on the starship could see it clearly from space. What did this mean? It meant that someone had come here and built these facilities before. Judging from the current situation, these facilities had been here for quite some time already. Who on earth built these facilities? Was the person who built these facilities related to the planet where the army was stationed? The technicians on the starship couldn't help but feel excited when they thought of this. The ground didn't stop shaking even after the protruding hills had lit up. It wasn't until a quarter-spherical building rose up from where Hui Mao was standing. The building was about 15 meters tall. After it rose into the air, Hui Mao stared at it while green strings of characters flashed in his eyes. Cheto cut off the image transmission with the starship and began analyzing the rising building. Hui Mao was decoding it, and Cheto was learning how to do it. It was a rare opportunity to learn such knowledge from a cyborg. Silin stared at the building. He knew that Hui Mao was talking to this, or rather, the giant machine underground. Although Silin couldn't talk to it himself, he could see the machine language and the communication between Hui Mao and the building. He didn't understand it. He could only see a little bit. 2 minutes later, a quarter of the spherical building opened towards the fan-shaped section where Silin and the others were. The next year, it was changed into a passageway. Let's go. It's just the few of us. The rest of you can wait outside. Entering without permission will only result in death. Hui Mao walked into the passageway with his tail raised. Silin and Cheto followed behind Hui Mao. Hui Mao's words were obviously meant for the 6th Division. The people who were about to land and enter the passageway were dumbfounded. "Commander, what do you think?" a team member asked Shoten directly. "Let's wait around and do as it says. Silin will send us a message soon," Shoten said. "Alright, that's all we can do for now. Use this time to look around and find the monsters' nests. The second group will arrive at the planet in a bit." After Shoten made some arrangements, he boarded the aircraft and went with the second group of people to the planet that had previously been identified as a C-class habitable planet. Things didn't seem to be as they had imagined. Chapter 208. Silin and Cheto followed Hui Mao into the building. There was a lighting device inside. The area they passed through would automatically light up, and it would only be extinguished after Silin and the others had completely passed through. It was obvious that the original owner of this place was a conservationist. It didn't take long for them to see an elevator. The doors opened on their own when they approached it, and Hui Mao walked in first. Silin followed suit without hesitation. The doors of the elevator closed and began to descend. After Silin and Cheto had entered the elevator, all the lights inside the building were turned off. The only illumination left was a small hill that protruded out of the building's exterior. Other than the noise caused by the 6th Division spaceplanes and fighter jets, there was only the faint rustling of the wind. Shoten and the others found this strange. If they hadn't seen those monsters before, they would have suspected that there weren't any high-level life forms here. They had searched so many places, but they couldn't find even the shadow of those monsters. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. "Did they burrow into the ground?" a technician asked. "It's very likely, but the detectors can't detect the situation below the ground. It doesn't match reality no matter how hard they try," said another technician with a troubled expression while looking at the scan. "We can't use these detectors, so we can only rely on our men to search for them." For the time being, Shoten did not let his squad members go down. After all, there were unknown dangers below, and the planet's environment was very harmful to the human body. It was very inconvenient for people wearing protective suits to move around, and if those monsters were to come out and attack them all at once, it would be terrible. Therefore, Shoten could not take this risk. He could only hope that Silin could send a message over as soon as possible. Silin and Hui Mao walked out of the elevator. There were several tunnels in front of them, and the elevator was located at the intersection of these tunnels. Hui Mao's goal was very clear. He didn't hesitate after exiting the elevator, and he didn't explain too much to Silin. He simply walked in a certain direction without hesitation. Looking at the construction of these passageways, Silin did not think that they were built by a super civilization. In fact, although these passageways were considered solid and reliable, in terms of technology, they were not as advanced as some bases in the League of Stars. Turning left and right, Silin saw some individual rooms, meeting rooms, big dining halls and even big auditoriums, but he didn't stop moving. Right now, Whis was running faster and faster, and it looked like it was in a better mood than before. It was even shouting as it ran. "Sigma! I'm coming! Come out and welcome us!" "Sigma? Who's Sigma?" Silin looked to the front. There were no people or animals. "Hubie Lu, nice to meet you." As an excited voice sounded, an opening suddenly opened in the wall in front of them, and a robot came out. If they saw this robot on the streets of the 10 trade sectors outside of Sector Z, they would definitely be laughed at for being an old antique, ugly and outdated. However, the robot that appeared here made Celine feel special. Looking at its appearance alone, this robot looked a little retro. Unlike Cheto's humanoid appearance and smooth movements, this robot didn't even have legs. Its cylindrical torso was a hemispherical thing that could roll in any direction. Its head was also a hemisphere connected to its torso, and a blue bar of light swept around it. This blue bar was probably its eyes. What was so special about this robot called Sigma? It had a head and legs that looked like a tumbler? His tone, his movements, and the change in the blue bar when he spoke. Its tone was very natural, and it sounded exactly the same as a human's. When it said that it was happy to see Wheeze, the blue light on its blue bar turned into a wavy shape, and it probably meant something similar to a human smile. Moreover, the worst part was that the bastard was waving its hands up and down like a fledgling flapping its wings when it was running. Hui Mao was so happy that he was running circles around Sigma, and Sigma was running circles around it. Even Celine was feeling a little dizzy. "Say, why don't you two take a break?" Celine asked. Sigma looked up at Celine and Cheto behind Celine. Then, it let out Tawa, and waved its arms a couple of times around Cheto and Celine. The aura of a kindred. Sigma was so happy that the blue bar on its face turned into a giant wave. The corner of Celine's mouth twitched. This robot's personality was similar to a child's. It was obvious that Hui Mao had been communicating with this robot all this time. After circling around Celine and Cheto a couple of times, Sigma stopped in front of Celine. Its blue bar turned into a question mark. "You're a human? But why do I sense the aura of a kindred?" Sigma asked. Hui Mao jumped onto Sigma's hemispherical head and introduced Celine and Cheto briefly. "Celine is a weirdo, but all you need to do is treat him as one of us. Don't worry too much about him." "All right." Sigma classified Hui Mao, Celine, and Cheto as one of their own. Then, he said to Celine, "The air composition and environment here have changed, so you can take off your protective suit now, Celine." Cheto didn't object to Sigma's suggestion. He had already measured the temperature, air pressure, humidity, and composition of the air. It was perfectly in line with human standards, so there was no need for him to wear a protective suit. This change only started when Sigma classified Celine as one of their own. The environment changed very quickly, and it only took a few seconds for it to change completely. Celine took off his protective suit and sucked in a breath of air. The oxygen and carbon dioxide levels were pretty good. "Come here, I'll show you around this base." Sigma waved at them and started walking, rolling, forward. Celine was very curious as to how it rolled, but when he saw that the exposed hemisphere representing its feet had turned into a tooth shape similar to that of the stairs when it climbed up a flight of stairs, and then climbed up step by step, he understood that the hemisphere representing its feet could change its state. Celine heard Hui Mao mention that the underground base was huge, but unlike other bases, this one was well equipped. It was almost like a perfect underground world, and there was even a large man-made lake. "Have you always been here alone, Sigma?" Celine asked. Sigma's voice suddenly turned sad. "Yeah, it's so boring. I have no choice but to enter hibernation. I won't wake up unless an outsider shows up." "What about those non-humans outside? We saw them before we came." "Oh, you mean Lovag and the others? They are the guardian beasts that guard this base. When there are no outsiders on the planet, they will enter a dormant state. Once an outsider invades, they will wake up and attack the outsiders." "Lovag?" Celine was a little confused. He had never heard of the word before, nor did he know what it meant. "Lovag means night. Master created them to protect this base like a knight." "Which sector's language is it from?" Celine asked. "It's not from here. It's from my homeland." Sigma's tone grew even sadder. "You're not from the League of Stars? Are you a robot?" "Nope." "Where's your master?" "He's not?" "Yes, Master was the one who brought me here. After Master and the others left, he asked me to stay here and guard this place," Sigma said in a sobbing tone. "I was asked to stay by the little miss and the others. To tell you the truth, I really miss them. Master said that I can't leave the base to look for them unless the shortcut is opened one day." "A shortcut?" Olilo's cage, the shortcut to new life. It was the same type of star map fragments Scylla possessed. As expected, Sigma's master was the one who left Olilo behind. Sigma was like a defenseless child. It answered everything Scylla asked, and this was mainly because of Wheeze. Then, it treated Scylla and the others as one of their own, and that was why it answered almost all of their questions. It didn't take long for Scylla to learn everything he needed. Sigma said that we can use this base. Hui Mao jumped onto Scylla's shoulder. Really? Scylla looked at Sigma. Yes. Master said that you can use this base as long as I approve of you. I approve of you. From Sigma's tone, it sounded more like he was excited to find a playmate in the future. Aren't your master coming back? Nope. Even if he does, he won't use this base. This used to be Master's old base, but he moved it. According to Sigma's master had relocated his base to the planet where the military was currently stationed. Do you want a base? Do you? Sigma's blue bars turned into two big circles and looked at Sigma expectantly. Of course, this abandoned base would save the 6th Division a lot of resources and energy. Moreover, according to Sigma, this base had always been in a state of stagnation. There's one problem. This planet's environment isn't good enough. We can't stay underground forever, can we? Scylla said with some regret. That's not a problem. Sigma circled around Scylla once before pointing a finger at him. Number 1, this base was originally above ground, but I had to go into hibernation and let it sink underground. So, when your master built the base, it was on the ground, and then you sank the base? How did you manage such a big project? Because I was bored. I didn't have anything to do anyway, Sigma said. Scylla's words were full of vicissitudes. A robot left alone in an old base. What an inspirational story. Sigma's voice was filled with joy as he raised another finger and said, My second question. This planet has been modified over a long period of time, and its environment can be adjusted. One of the reasons why the base was built to cover such a large area is that it can affect the entire planet's environment and air composition. Sigma's voice was filled with joy. It can be changed? Scylla exclaimed in surprise. Of course, it can change the atmosphere, air composition, and air pressure within an hour. That's how it used to be. Before Master left, everyone could do whatever they wanted. The blue bars on Sigma's face floated upward as if reminiscing. Scylla rubbed his chin and beckoned Sigma with a finger. What's your decision? Sigma immediately leaned toward him. After discussing a few things with Sigma, Scylla told Sigma to keep the shortcut a secret for the time being. Once everything was ready and their testimony was checked, Scylla finally allowed Sigma to start reorganizing the base. Outside the planet's surface. Inside the space plane, Shotten stared at the planet's surface on the screen. It was desolate and devoid of life. There was water and low-level flora and fauna on the planet, but they didn't add much life to the planet, and there were only a few of them. It made the planet look lonely and pitiful. While Shotten was thinking about something, Scylla's communicator connected. What's the situation? Shotten asked. You'll know in a moment, Captain. For now, have everyone go to the sky and don't leave anyone near the ground. I'll show you what we got in 2 minutes. Scylla's tone was very certain. Although Shotten was puzzled, he temporarily suppressed his doubts and ordered everyone to go to the sky. Once everything was ready, everyone stared at the scene below. The people on the starship also stared unblinkingly at the image on the screen. The glowing hills on the planet's surface grew brighter and brighter. Then, the ground began to shake even more violently than before. Even the rocks and sand on the surface were pushed away. Then, the base that had been hidden underground for hundreds of years finally saw the light of day again. Everyone in the 6th Division stared blankly at the magnificent building that stretched as far as the eye could see. The base gradually grew taller and taller. The surrounding area was completely covered in sand, but above the sand, the high-rise building of the base looked like a leader, guiding the underground parts of the base upward. An hour later, as the sand layer gradually dissipated, everyone finally saw the underground giant under the illumination of the hill-like light. It looked like an earth dragon bursting out of the ground. It was as solemn as a military fortress. Sillin. Shotun's voice sounded a little hoarse. He seemed to know what was going to happen next. His heart rate sped up subconsciously, and he couldn't find his composure just yet. Wait, Captain. We'll talk later. What else? Shotun and the others held their breaths. They stared at the situation on the ground. 1 minute, nothing. 5 minutes later, there was still nothing. 10 minutes, 20 minutes? Sillin, what's going on? There's no movement? Shotun finally couldn't help but ask. It was rare for the 6th Division captain to be so impatient. Before Sillin could answer, some of the technicians on the starship excitedly told Shotun, "Captain, the planet's atmosphere has thickened. According to the monitoring data sent back by the detector, the planet's habitability is changing from C-class to B-class habitability. In other words, this giant could change the planet to B-class habitability. It could also change it to C-class habitability. Who would have the ability to do so?" Thump, 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 thump. Shotun could hear his own heartbeat and warm blood flowing through his veins. Finally, Sillin's voice came to Shotun. "Captain, the transformation is complete. There's no need to wear the protective suit now." Following Sillin's voice, a flat landing field appeared in the base. It was practically a temporary port. Good. Shotun landed the spaceplane on the ground and stepped out of it. He didn't wear the protective suit. The base's purification had calmed down the sand and dust. Now, the proportion of the various elements in the air was the standard, and the temperature was only slightly colder. For hunters like Shotun and the others, this was nothing more than normal. Sillin was already waiting at one of the landing field's entrances. When he saw Shotun, he briefly explained the base to him and then introduced Sigma to him. After listening to Sillin's explanation, Shotun's first words were, "Are you willing to join the 6th Division?" What followed was a string of child abduction excuses that turned the blue light on Sigma's face into a dizzying circle. Sigma didn't know what decision to make, so it turned to Huimao. "Hubeilu, are you a member of Vanguard Division 6? "Of course. I'm still a core combatant," Huimao said while looking up from Sillin's shoulder. "Core combatant my ass." Not far away, Carrie curled his lips. However, Carrie and the others' reactions weren't within Sigma's consideration. It only accepted the opinions of its own people. Little did they know that Huimao was also abducted by Sillin. Every member of the 6th Division went crazy when they saw the fortress that covered 1/5 of the entire planet. It was a blessing in disguise. The A Squadron allowed the B Squadrons to move freely, choose freely, and build their own temporary strongholds. This was also a test of the ability of the B Squadrons. Every once in a while, someone from the A Squadron would visit the temporary strongholds of the B Squadrons for inspection. Shotun was already looking forward to the A Squad's arrival. He couldn't help but wonder how they would react when they saw this magnificent sight. Sigma was more than happy to see the 6th Division move in, but the first problem they had to solve was compatibility. Lovag was a guardian beast herd with a chip inside its body, so Sigma needed to modify the chip's information so that both sides could live in harmony with each other. Back when the base was still underground, the guardian beast's food came from the nutrient fluid stored in the underground base. Since the nutrient fluid was limited, the guardian beasts would go underground and hibernate whenever no one was around. But now, the 6th Division didn't mind sacrificing a lot of food just to get along with the guardian beasts. Since they decided to set up a temporary stronghold on this planet, the first thing they had to do was build a satellite defense network. That being said, it had nothing to do with Huimao. Right now, Huimao was very conflicted because he noticed that Sillin, Cheto, and Sigma all started with the word she. Does that mean I'm being ostracized? No, I can't be too different. But do I really have to change it to Hubeilu? That sounds so bad. Chapter 209. Right now, the 6th Division was so busy that they could barely breathe. However, everyone was so excited that they were willing to work as hard as they could. At first, they thought that they would have to build a temporary base on 2 underdeveloped B-rank habitable planets, and they were even prepared to be laughed at by the B squadrons ahead of them. But who would have thought that things would take such a huge turn? Thanks to this, Silin's influence in the 6th Division grew even greater. Many of the team members would mention that Schotten would be replaced by Silin as the commander of the 6th Division during private conversations. Silin was still very young, and Schotten was in the prime of his life. Judging from the current situation, Schotten couldn't be promoted to the A Squadron in the short term, so they only talked about it when they had nothing to do with each other. Silin had talked to Diaz once about this rumor. No one knew what Silin and Diaz talked about, and the two didn't behave strangely after the conversation, so no one paid it any attention. Sigma explained the situation of the base to the technical team one by one, and then left them to figure it out on their own. The childish bastard didn't have the patience to stay with the technicians all day. After a heated discussion about the base's defense network, they finally decided to build a 3-layer defense network. The first layer was the defense network built by the technical team. The second layer was the defense network built by Yudi, Beaver, and Silin. The third layer was the one-track defense network that existed to begin with. The last layer was the base's foundation, and it wouldn't be manipulated by anyone. Of course, this anyone didn't include Sigma. Yudi and Beaver had built a database based on the data Silin brought back from Sector S's prison. At the same time, they upgraded the defense network and developed a new defense network. However, the technical team didn't agree with Yudi and Beaver's new defense network. That was why the 3-layer defense network was created. Sigma didn't mind setting up 3 layers of defense as long as they didn't destroy the base. Apart from that, they could do whatever they wanted. Recently, some of the members of the 6th Squad had been familiarizing themselves with the Lovag Guardian beasts. Although these genetically engineered beasts looked ferocious, their personalities were not what they appeared to be. They only had one bottom line, and that was not to destroy the base. Therefore, these ferocious-looking Lovag Guardian beasts were actually loyal to the base. If outsiders attacked, these Guardian beasts would fight until they died. To the people of the 6th Division, this was undoubtedly good news. At the very least, the Lovag Guardian beasts would not betray them. From a certain point of view, these simple-minded creatures were very cute. Silin observed for a moment. After more than 20 days, the Lovag Guardian beasts were showing signs of reproducing. If their food supply was stable, the second batch of Lovag Guardian beasts would arrive soon. When the second generation of Lovag's Guardian beasts arrived, Sigma would implant them with a chip similar to the one implanted in the first generation. They would work together to defend the base. Recently, Sigma had been very happy to have a large group of playmates, unlike the dormant Lovag Guardian beasts in the past. As a result, Sigma, Shuechiyo, and the others could often be seen running around the base like crazy. What a child who's been holding back for so long. To everyone's surprise, however, Huimao had always been quiet and spacing out. Today, Silin, Yudi, and Beaver were conducting the final inspection of the second layer of defense network. Let's take a break. We're tired from all the work we've done. The last bit will only take 3 hours, and we'll still have time to eat dinner with everyone, Beaver said while wiping the sweat off his face. Then let's rest. I'm hungry too. Silin took out some food from his bag and told everyone to fill their stomachs. They hadn't made it in time for the inspection of the defense network. Say, Wheeze, why don't you go out and play with them? Yudi asked Huimao. He knew that the Miantuan was nowhere to be seen as of late because it was playing with Sigma, Shuechiyo, and the others. Wheeze has been spacing out a lot lately, Beaver said. The cat had been sitting next to them and watching them inspect the network for days. I'm meditating. Huimao was furious. Spacing out and meditating were two completely different concepts. While it was true that the cat spent most of its time spacing out, it was still meditating a lot of the time. Silin flicked Huimao's ears. Fine. What are you meditating about? Huimao's ears twitched, but he didn't say anything. Silin and the others didn't rush him either. 10 minutes later, Huimao finally couldn't hold it in any longer and said, I'm thinking if I should change my name. Isn't your name pretty good? You named it yourself, didn't you? Silin knew about the cat's narcissism. But Huimao raised a paw and bent the tip. Silin, Cheto, and Sigma all start with the word she, so I'm thinking if I should add a she in front of my name. There's no need, Silin said. Besides, my surname isn't she. That's right. Hui Mao's eyes suddenly lit up. It was true that Silin's surname wasn't she. Silin said that his surname was Yuan, so it didn't matter what came after it as long as it wasn't his surname. Hui Mao's thoughts were very simple, so it didn't take long to figure it out. It was at this moment Sigma and the others came over to invite Hui Mao out to play. Xueqiu was lying on Sigma's back. Tang Qiuqiu couldn't carry him like she used to because the white fatty was gaining weight at an insane rate. Although Tang Qiuqiu couldn't carry him, and the other members of the 6th squad didn't want to either, Sigma could. In fact, he didn't feel any pressure at all. The Miantuan was lying on top of Sigma's head and giggling happily. Hurry up, Wheeze. Carrie wants to duel us. Xueqiu tilted his head to the side and said. Hui Mao happened to be in a good mood, so he asked excitedly, that kid wants to duel us? What kind of duel? Duel in the air. Sigma answered immediately. The long, wavy lines on his face showed just how excited he was right now. Duel in the air? Silin looked at them and asked, he's flying a fighter? Yeah, Carrie said he'll be flying a fighter. Oh, and maybe Yudo's too. Xueqiu pulled at his ears and laughed. Then how are you going to fly up there? Beaver asked. I can fly by myself. Sigma's hemispherical body slowly changed shape and floated up into the air. It was very agile in this small space. If Sigma can fly, then what about you kids? Are you going to lie on it like you are now? Silin asked. Of course not. Xueqiu raised his head. We have Lovag. Hui Mao's eyes flashed when he heard this. Silin thought, this cat is up to no good again. Are there no stakes? Hui Mao asked. Stakes? Sigma scratched its head and only put its hand down when it touched the Miantuan. Clearly, it didn't know what stakes meant. Hui Mao, Xueqiu, and the Miantuan shared a look. They all knew what Sigma was thinking, and they all laughed sinisterly. All right, this time we're going to lose everything in that Carrie bastard's cabinet until there's nothing left of him. The gray cat shouted. Yeah, we're going to make sure he loses everything in his cabinet. Silin and the other two thought to themselves as they watched the guys leave. Lovag's guardian beast can fly? Yudi narrowed his eyes. I think so, according to them, Beaver said. No one knew about this. Should we go check it out? Silin looked at the rest of the work. We can't delay this. Are you sure you can come back in an hour? Beaver shook his head. Forget it. Let's finish the inspection first. The three immediately got to work. Although they were working faster, they didn't slack off. What was supposed to take 3 hours was now done in 1.5 hours. After packing up their tools, Silin and the other two walked out of the base. There were quite a lot of people outside the base. They were all watching the battle, cheering and roaring from time to time. Of course, the cheers were for Hui Mao and the others. Many of them were making fun of Carrie. Yudo's, hurry up and come help us. Carrie was almost going crazy in his fighter. These guys are so hard to deal with. His observation window was filled with the thick layer of mud bombs thrown by Xueqiu and the others. It was easy to see how badly Carrie was getting beaten up. When Carrie's fighter was hit by a mud bomb, the people below it roared in unison. Carrie was so angry that smoke was rising from his forehead. In the end, he couldn't help but ask Yudos to come up and share the firepower. When Silin and the others went out, Yudos happened to be flying his fighter. Carrie was caught in a pincer attack from 3 sides. 2 Lovags were carrying Xueqiu and Hui Mao, the Miantuan was with Hui Mao, and Sigma was on the other side. Sigma was as excited as a child that had just been let out to play. Xueqiu and Hui Mao weren't easy to deal with, and the Miantuan would occasionally toss mud bombs at them. Those Lovags are pretty agile in the air, Yudi said. It was true that if we hadn't contacted Sigma and opened the underground base to them, the reinforcements they sent might not have been able to come out on top. No one knew that these guys could fly at the time, not to mention that they couldn't fly at all. There was an opening on each side of the Lovag's back. Before this, Silin didn't think that they were wings. After all, these guys looked too similar to terrestrial insects. But now it seemed that Sigma's master had thought things through. If Silen's guess was right, these love eggs could move freely in the water. They were the product of genetic engineering. In their natural state, there were very few creatures that could do everything in the air, on land, and in water. These love eggs were very qualified to be guardians. Yudo's fighter took off some of Carrie's firepower, but Sigma was clearly more excited than Huimao. Just like Huimao, its mud bombs were incredibly accurate. Although the interval between each throw was short, and it didn't seem like it was aimed, it had actually done thousands of calculations and threw them according to the most likely trajectory. Silen had been studying Sigma all this time. Although most of the robots in the League of Stars looked similar to humans on the outside, most of them were still mechanized on the inside. The Robert family had improved their robots a lot and made them more human-like and intelligent. Cheto, on the other hand, was closer to a human than the Robert family's robots. However, Cheto's thinking was only superior compared to the Robert family's robots. Compared to Sigma, Cheto's thinking was a little more human-like. A human's thinking wasn't perfect, and there were always so many flaws in a person's personality. Some were childish and some were deep. Sigma was more like a child than a human. The only difference was that Sigma was wearing a robot skin. Sigma would get nervous when it was in an emergency, but it would show its mood on its face when it encountered something fun. Cheto, on the other hand, was more like an adult who had experienced the world. A robot like Sigma was the most carefree choice for its creator, and very few people paid attention to a childish robot like Sigma. Sigma didn't have a liquid crystal nuclear brain or a central chip, but Silen's research revealed that there was something similar to a human brain inside its brain. It was a discovery that shocked Silen to no end. What kind of person was the creator of Sigma? To think that the creator actually treated Sigma like a human. The more Silen learned about Sigma's way of thinking, the more interested he became in Sigma's birthplace. The technological civilization there wasn't necessarily much higher than the League of Stars's, but each had their own strengths. At the very least, they were a little more unique than the League of Stars when it came to the creation of robots. When would the shortcut be completed? In the end, Carrie lost everything in his storage cabinet, and Yudo's lost a third of his stock. When the battle was over, Huimao and Shueqiao split the spoils, and the two love eggs came over to join in the fun. After all, they had a share in the victory, so they squealed happily after getting the food and crawled back into the underground cave. This incident caused Huimao and the love eggs to volunteer themselves whenever there was an exciting duel, but no one in the 6th Division was stupid enough to compete with them again. After the temporary base was built, they had to send people to collect energy ores from planets with energy signatures they detected during the search for suitable planets. Energy reserves were essential for the survival of the base. Other than that, they also had to collect food and go hunting. The food grown in the base was just the beginning, and it wasn't enough to supply the daily needs of the entire 6th Division. Silen and the love eggs were going to search for energy ores and food, but Sigma couldn't leave. It had to stay at the base. The love eggs couldn't leave either. This was their base, and they wouldn't leave even if they died. The good news was that the base was covered by the network, so Huimao told Cheto to send the footage to Sigma. Sigma wasn't interested in energy ores, but it was interested in mining them. Therefore, while Silen and the others were mining the energy ores, Sigma was staring at the big screen in envy. Why wasn't it the mining machine that they were talking about? On the mining planet, Silen and the love eggs came across some nutritious plants that could be used as food. All they had to do was remove the poison sac from their bodies. Silen even demonstrated the process to Sigma, causing the love eggs to move their fingers as if they were touching the plants themselves. While Sigma was watching the footage intently, a squeak suddenly came from behind. It was a 10-centimeter tall newborn love eggs. Adult love eggs didn't come into the base often, and they rarely came after the 6th Division arrived. But this newborn love eggs was different. Sigma had implanted a chip into it after it was born. Without the chip, the love eggs were considered idiots and retards. But after the chip was implanted, the love eggs were no different from children. They were curious about everything and often moved around Sigma. In its core consciousness, Sigma was the safest character. Little Loveags had poked its head out to look for Sigma's movements, but it noticed that Sigma hadn't gone out to play as of late. That was why it came over. Little Loveags jumped onto Sigma's arm. Although its pincers were small, they were very strong and attached to Sigma's arm. Meow! Little Loveags are here. Hui Mao and the others greeted Little Loveags. Yeah. Little Loveags were very happy to see them. They jumped on Sigma's arm to express their excitement. Sillin didn't interrupt Hui Mao and the others' video chat with Sigma. He cleaned the plants in his hand and collected some seeds. At the same time, he collected the poisonous sacs inside the plants. These were very rare medicines. This planet was very strange. Its habitability was between C and B rank. Places with dense vegetation didn't require protective clothing, but places with sparse vegetation did. There were energy ores in places with sparse vegetation, and some people were mining them. Right now, Sillin was in a place with dense vegetation. The reason why Sillin thought this planet was strange wasn't because of its habitability. It was because there were no animals on this planet. There were a lot of highly evolved plants, but not a single animal. Not even a small insect could be seen. The evolution of the species on this planet was clearly different from other planets. Without animals, the competition between the plants was very fierce. They had evolved all kinds of methods. If a tree couldn't move, it would be strangled by the vines. The vines would pierce their thorns into the tree trunk to absorb nutrients. However, although the vines could climb up quickly, they moved horizontally very slowly. As long as the tree moved slightly, it would break free from the vines. If the vines were too tight, and the tree moved too hard, the vines would break, and the vines would wither. There was also a kind of fruit that looked like a pomegranate. When in danger, the top of the fruit would open and spit out the seeds inside one by one. When Sillin came over, he was attacked by these fruits. At the same time, Sillin also saw one of the vines that had extended towards the fruit being shot by the bullets. The fruit spat out. This was a very strange place. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.